Welcome to Pitching Pixels. My name is Tennyson Stead. This is Greg Schwartz. This is a weekly show where we get together and we talk through the adaptation of a video game property into film. And we've already found some challenges with this process along the way. Our first week was StarCraft. Our second week was Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Today we're going to be talking through Space Quest, the Sierra classic, and I've had some thoughts about this week. I've got it. No, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be good.
I love Sierra. I just like I forget it's always Sierra. And just for the audience, we do have this extra cute fuzzy guest today hanging out.
So before
Just
we
chilling on my desk.
before we get into the show, Greg, please tell everybody who you are, what's going on with your life, and where they can find you on the interwebs.
Yeah, I'm writer, director, producer. Currently in my life, I'm in development on a lower budget feature film that I wrote. I will direct. It's a coming of age drama. And you can find me. My personal Instagram is Ninja Bicycle. My production company's Instagram is Mighty Fox Productions. We don't really post a whole lot there, but yeah, I mean, it's just I'm an industry guy. I'm a stunt performer. Just got actually acting representation of all things like 3 weeks ago, which was really cool. And yeah, I'm kind of at this point I consider myself an industry lifer kind of thing.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
My name is Tennyson E. Stead. I'm a screenwriter. I'm a script doctor. I've produced films. I've basically done everything there is to do in show business. My background's in theater, and this channel exists because of some interactive work that I'm doing. I'm developing a project, a game, a tabletop role playing game, and various other ancillary media called Jump Rangers. Jump Rangers is about kid space commandos fighting a space empire of alien dinosaurs and trying to find a place for humanity in the stars when the stars have basically conquered us. So the sort of trick.
Feels like Space Quest is a good, not comp, but like I feel like there's got to be some tonal similarities.
Do you know? I talking through the work today. I think actually that's less true than you might suppose. And I'm gonna
Sure.
actually lead with. Um, so just to put a button on the Jump Rangers thing, I will say that the sort of trick to the whole universe is that humanity doesn't have interstellar travel. We were invaded by the Saurian horde. The only way that people could survive was by sneaking aboard these alien spaceships and spreading out into the galaxy. So we're kind of the borrowers. We live in
Got
the
it.
walls. We're the bed bugs and rats and the pests of the universe.
We're not the innovators in this one.
Nope. We're trying to
Got it.
survive in this world. So, and the sort of tonal trick to the whole thing is that, yes, the grown ups in this universe are living very much a post apocalyptic adventure story, but
Oh, for sure.
the kids get to go on adventures. The kids, because being small and adaptable is so important to our survival, being quick enough and fast enough and unnoticeable enough to sneak aboard these alien spaceships and develop new trade routes and find new help human colonists get from place to place or carry information or find new places to colonize or sabotage alien extermination efforts or whatever the case may be. It's the kids who are sort of leading this future, and that's who the Jump Rangers are. So, there's sort of a duality to it, and learning to live with the paradox of having childhood impulses and finding fun and finding all these things that are out there to be found, and at the same time having these high stakes, I think is something that kids in this world today understand. I think anyway.
Oh yeah.
I that the sense of innocence and the sense of trust in innocence that Jump Rangers has, I don't think is something you're going to see in Space Quest. I think that like
Totally fair. Yeah.
like
And so again, you and I have talked about this. No one else knows. I've only played the second Space Quest, and that was I was quite a younger man when that happened.
I'm going to tell you I think that the second Space Quest really set the tone and set the bar for the series.
Okay.
Although the third Space Quest arguably perfected it. So
Ooh.
the second Space Quest sort of said we could be doing so much more. And then the third Space Quest said, "Oh, we could be doing so much more." And then, and then,
Yeah.
and then from there, I think they sort of they tried to adapt to the changing technology. One of the things that Space Quest was defined by was the fact that when the game was developed, graphics and the technology of computer gaming was so
8-bit
rudimentary. Yeah,
MS Paint graphics.
and they did amazing stuff with those
It
early.
really did.
It's the most, I think, the most beautiful 8-bit Sierra game. I think it
Okay.
looks better. Like Police
This
Quest,
was this was 2 or 1 or 3?
I think 1 and 2. 3 is
Okay.
gorgeous, but it's VGA.
Yeah,
And
so really quick, like my background with Sierra was King's Quest, which is the fantasy
yes,
version. Space Quest was the sci-fi, King's Quest was the fantasy.
yes.
And so for me, like King's Quest, I haven't played 1 or 3, but I've done 2, 4, 5, 6, and then 7 was a little bit of a disappointment if I'm being honest. But to me, like 6 was, oh my god, this was the next level of game for me. It was the first King's Quest to use a mouse, actually,
Yep,
to have a controllable cursor that you could point and click. It wasn't just we were running it off of the DOS Unix programming kind of thing
yep,
on the old 3.5, not 3.5 inch, yeah, 3.5 inch like floppy, not diskettes, not the big floppy ones, the
yep,
the small diskette ones.
yep.
And oh my God, it's just some of those. I think the fourth one and the fifth one were the two I played the most. But then my parents found the second at some point. But yeah, I mean, I don't really remember if I mean I would guess that the second King's Quest had to also be 8-bit graphics, and then I would
It
guess
was
that
for
4 and
sure.
5 were. I think 4 and 5 were probably 16-bit.
Yep.
Um, but and then 6 was probably VGA. But like, all of those Sierra games, I mean, it's Sierra and Sierra Online and all that, it was just like defined my childhood. It was my
Yeah.
first video game experience ever. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, even though I only have played one installment of the Space Quest series, there's like a lot of that mystique, that enchantment that came from those games. There's going to be overlap between Space
They
Quest and
were
King's Quest.
they were the most ambitious PC games of their time, for sure.
Were they like the first RPGs ever kind of thing?
Nope. But um previous role-playing games that had come out before then were a lot of the time using ASCII graphics,
Okay.
um or very rudimentary graphics. I think it was the artwork that really defined Sierra. Because the artwork was so on point, the world building was more on point, and the whole game became more credible. That
Okay.
that because until then you really, like, I remember playing in my when I was younger than 10, and I was at my neighbor's house, and there was this Bard's Tale esque um ASCII game where it was all line art and the skeletons were made of lines and everything, and you were working your way through a dungeon and all this and that. There's been a bunch of stuff. There was a
I
Stephen King
remember a
Myst game.
game.
There was a lot of text based RPGs as well.
What was there was a game that I played that I think falls into this category. Like what, not this game, but I adored Castle of the Winds. Oh my God, the old Windows 3.1 game.
Hmm.
Oh, I have such a fondness for that game, such a place in my heart. But that's not the one. There was a game that I played, like I think it was, I only played it one time in my life. It was like my parents went to some, I don't know, a party
Yeah.
at a friend's house. I must have been, God, I can't imagine that I was older than like 6 or 7. And me, because I'm the kid, right? Like they set me up on their computer and I can just play while the adults do their thing.
Yeah.
There's some game, I want to say it was called like Prophecy of Darkness or something like that.
Hmm.
And it was very much, I think it was exactly like you describing it, kind of like the ASCII graphics, and yeah, just like blocks rather than any art
Yep.
kind of thing moving around. And they all had it was all very logical representation. It was easy to understand, but like,
It wasn't immersive in the
yeah.
same way that we. And I will tell you, you know, So there's a couple thoughts that I have in terms of approaching this content, which I'm going to put
We
on the
do
table right up front. Yeah,
in some future installment of this podcast. Can we do Castle of the Winds? Because like that would be
I'd have to
amazing.
look it up. I have no knowledge of this game, so I would need to do some research, but certainly we
It's awesome.
can.
I think it was meant to be Dungeons like a single player version of Dungeons and Dragons. It was random seed as far as I understand. The game was different every time you played it in terms of
Mhm.
the dungeon layout, but you had incredible customization with the character, like the armor you put on, where you assigned your attribute points.
Mhm.
There were different spells that did different things. There was melee combat, there was magic combat, and it was all like done on these atrocious. Like do you remember like Chip's Challenge and stuff like that? Those graphics
Nope.
or like oh there was, I think it was called Pipe Dream or something like there was these older kind of games. It was just ridiculous Windows 3.1 just
I remember Pipe Dream.
icon art
Yeah.
that would just move in blocks, right? Because there wasn't animation. It
Yeah.
was just it was still art that moved,
Yep.
kind of thing.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that was the
So
other thing
yeah,
about Sierra was that they animated
yeah.
so much, and
Yes.
seeing that work really
Walk
clearly.
cycling, right? Like walk cycles
All the
that had to be a Sierra thing,
all
right?
the artwork it was. All the
Yeah,
artwork also had like background animations. Everything was puffing and this and that. Everything was done very very intentionally,
it was
and
art. Yeah,
part of the reason why you had to walk from one scene to the next, the reason why it's all done in frames, is because they couldn't scroll it because they didn't have.
yeah,
It was too much. It was too much for the computer.
yeah.
So
It'd be like like an open world kind of like either a roguelite or a side scroller where you have to basically load the entire thing
yep,
at any given point.
yep,
You
that's right.
know, which
That's
is
right.
like what is like if we talk about like what in my opinion is the greatest side scroller of all time, which would be Mega Man X, and like it's a seamless level until the boss fight, which is clearly like they had to load the reason why there was like a boss. It was great to prep the player, but clearly they also had to load like maybe
Assets.
the boss
Yep,
mechanics because the
yep.
level itself it's just a frame, but
hmm
whatever it was. And yeah, I mean
Something was taking up
it makes
memory, and they needed to.
exactly. Yeah, and it's just those games. I mean, the early games. It's so obvious to if you really think about it and observe it. It's easy to look back and see how we got to where we are now.
hmm
And the Sierra games are integral in all of the video game industry, and
I agree.
it's a whole different world without the Sierra games.
Yep. So number one, because of this, I think that there's more of a financial opportunity than we were talking about last time. I think that this
Ooh,
is. I think that
more than like Modern Warfare, more than StarCraft.
No, 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 no. I mean more than we were discussing with the Sierra games. I think this isn't a
Oh,
micro budget. I think this is something different.
got you.
I think that if you talk to the streaming companies, they're going to want to see if they can mine this 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 content for, if a license might be worth something. So I think they want. I think there's a sense of exploration in the investment sense here, where they want to see, like, is this a viable source to pull content from? Because everybody's always looking for content, and because the games are iconic, is there an opportunity here? So I think that they would make an investment beyond just like a $250,000 movie. That's the first thing. The second
Okay.
thing is, I think it's an animated series. I think it needs
So
to
we
be.
talking like Saturday morning cartoons, like the
Nope.
original, like X-Men and
No,
Batman and stuff like
we
that,
are
or
talking a Netflix or Amazon adult animated series. We're talking
like Invincible.
more like a Seth MacFarlane show.
Okay,
More like
okay,
more like more like or maybe slightly skewing towards BoJack Horseman.
all right. I was gonna say there's a show I've only seen a couple episodes of, but I know it's very kind of like loved among its niche following. I don't know what was it, a C Lab 20 something something.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, something like that. But I mean, maybe like an Archer almost, or
Well, I think here's the sort of givens.
okay.
Something that you need to know is that after Space Quest 2, as they go into Space Quest 3, they break the fourth wall for the first time.
Ooh, okay.
Space Quest 3 is so Space Quest 2 obviously has a lot of satire. Like,
Don't they break the fourth wall like in just like little Easter egg moments in the second one?
yes, the game talks
Okay.
to you as though you're being an idiot, but but which is funny and it's well written. It's really
It's
good.
beautiful. It's beautiful.
But in Space Quest 3, um the the crux of the story, Roger Wilco has to escape from this thing that he's basically been he's in an alien situation. He's been picked up in his escape pod and he needs to.
Right, because the end of Space Quest 2 is you escape Volhal's ship as
Yep.
it's blowing up, and the game ends as you're like drifting in space in the escape pod, right?
So it ends in an aliens moment and you break yourself out of the salvage ship and you
Okay.
make your way to kind of the Space Quest McDonald's thing. And then you find a decoder ring in your treat, and the decoder ring was put there by game developers who have been captured by the pirates of Pexiar, Prexiar or something like that.
I'll
And
take your word for it.
and the pirates have taken all these game developers and are locking them up in an evil game development facility and are forcing them to make terrible games for shit money. And um, they need you to come rescue them. And the game developers are the two guys from Andromeda,
Oh god.
who are the creators of Space Quest.
Right.
Only they gave themselves character designs. And then at the end of Space Quest 3, you rescue them and you drop them off at Sierra Interactive, and they go make the Space Quest games.
Love it.
Like, so,
Yeah.
which
It's very Lord of the Rings with like Frodo writing the Lord of the Rings at the end of Lord of the Rings kind of thing.
it is, and at the same time, like, we also have to remember that this was like 1990 or earlier. Like,
Yeah.
when did Space Quest 3 come out?
Was it really that old?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um,
Space Quest 3 was released.
the original was 86.
Space Quest 3: The Pirates of Pestilon is 1989. This was still in the 80s.
Wow. Wow, Space Quest 2 was the year I was born. That's incredible.
I
Okay.
remember getting Space Quest 2. I was with my dad. We went to a computer store because I was starting to learn computer programming, and I
Really?
was like 10. Yeah, I was interested in game design, and
That's awesome.
and I I was picking up a couple things for the 2GS that we had, and Space Quest 2 was sitting there, and I was like, "What? What?" Because I had played Space Quest 1 from like the age of 5 or 6, and it took me a really long time to beat it, but I did beat it. And
So there were
I
6 total, it looks like?
Yep, yep. I I,
Okay.
I recently got the Space Quest pack,
Okay.
and I've started playing Space Quest 4, and I need to restart it because I've uh, I've screwed up a little bit. Like, and it's one of those things where I saved in the wrong place, and I've cornered
Ugh.
myself. So I need to go back and start it over, and I haven't done that yet. Um, but what I'm thinking is that, you know, the game industry being what it is today, you can't not do game industry satire with Space Quest. Space Quest 4, by the way, is a time hopping adventure where Roger Wilco goes forward in time and backward in time to other space quests.
Yeah, I seen I'm checking out the Wikipedia is in fiction future sequels.
Yes.
In Space Quest, it's just in Space Quest 10, Space
Yep.
Quest 12.
Yep.
It's awesome.
He goes back to
It's oh
Space
my god,
Quest.
seeing some of these remembers. I just this is I guess slightly off topic. It's still a Sierra game, but
Hmm.
did you ever play Leisure Suit Larry?
A little bit. A little bit. I did.
Oh my oh my god. So this was a game from my childhood as well, but of course it was an 18 plus game, and so it
Yep.
had these trivia questions you had to answer in order to be able to play the game.
Yes.
And at a certain point in life, I mean, my parents couldn't even get past like the very first like puzzle segment. So at a certain point, I convinced my parents to like just answer the questions for me so I could play it because they were like, he's never gonna get past it anyway. It's not gonna be. And I like it took me like a week, but I did actually get past it
Hmm.
and like started being able to play the game. And they were like, oh, okay. And I just held the whole thing. And I just thought like Leisure Suit Larry is another thing that I think like I wouldn't say if you were gonna start like building, you know, the film franchise, the Sierra cinematic universe, as it were, right?
I don't know that
Um,
Sierra still owns Leisure Suit Larry.
well, I'm just
No,
labeling it just for convenience.
but I
Kind of
think
thing.
it has.
Yeah.
I think the rights to Leisure Suit Larry have become a little bit of a mess, is what I'm saying. I think that I think that it's been bought and sold a few times. I think that someone is in development with the game now.
Really?
Yep. There's been iterations outside of Sierra. So
Huh.
so the question of who owns the film rights could be sticky.
Development teams, publishers. Yeah, it seems like there were some trying, like some newer ones tried to be made,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that.
Yep.
The original series was Al Low, same as King's Quest 3
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. I don't see. um, First release. There was a latest release, 2020, October 23rd.
Yep.
That's so weird.
The game did not get
Uh,
great reviews, but I I, I,
develop,
I I follow the Sierra games because like you say, I do love them. I love the stuff, the world that they built. I love
I
the
just think that like doing the original would be hilarious, right? It's like it would kind. I feel like it would kind of be like some weird combination of like swingers and 40-year-old virgin.
it. I think that there's issues with it, but if someone is going to do it, they should do it while Paul Giamatti is still alive. There's also,
Yeah.
by the way, a lot of,
Oh my God, he'd be so good.
but there's also huge, and this is something that that franchise has wrestled with, and that I don't think they've really found a way around. You have to deal with the anti-Semitism, like like
I was probably too young to pick up on any of it.
we both were, but
Yeah. Yeah,
unquestionably
it's
that
there.
it's very stark,
Okay.
and I don't know that I don't know that it can survive that. And I think that
We have a redact button.
I but why not just develop other, why
Yeah.
cling to beloved content that is
Fair.
problematic when we could be developing new content, which isn't what this
And
show's about, but it's a
you
but
know, you make a really good point though, because I think that that's honestly probably kind of becoming more of a rampant issue. These people like not just people, but like studios or whatever clinging to beloved pre-existing IP just for the sake of like risk mitigation kind of thing.
well, at some points you have to start asking, like, when that IP is, let's say, problematic, right? When it is that,
Right.
to what extent
Well,
to what extent
I mean,
are we
I
clinging?
understand that this is like a little bit beyond the scope of our of our show, but
Yeah,
like I watched a lot of behind the scenes on Shang-Chi,
yeah,
and like because I'm in love with that movie. Honestly, I think it's just
it's a delightful
you know
movie.
it's a delightful movie. It's a love letter to Asian cinema while still being authentically part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And but the thing about it, I watched a lot of behind the scenes on it, and there was a lot of talk about how they were like, well, like how do we get this story on the screen? Because the original comic is like it's really kind of like not doesn't
Orientalist.
work
It's highly Orientalist,
right.
and
It's kind of like the whole Mickey Rooney in Breakfast at Tiffany's thing
yep,
a little bit.
yep.
And yeah, and hearing them talk, like showing pages of the original comic and how they portrayed, Shang-Chi and how they had to like kind of I don't know, revamp or, the image in order to make it, watchable.
There's so much of that in Marvel,
Yeah.
and it's because, like, so much of Marvel was caricature. Like, New York, you can't have Marvel without talking about the history of New York. And
Okay.
part of the history of New York is that you have waves of immigrants that come into the city and institutionalize themselves and then other the next wave of immigrants. And so you can't talk about Marvel without talking about Brooklyn and Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And
Right.
as you have that conversation, of course they're going to have a natural proclivity towards discrimination towards other waves of immigrants that came into the city, even if they don't know that that's where they're coming from. And
Yeah.
if you're digging through Marvel's backlog, and then they know that they screwed up on the Mandarin. They know that they did. That was, and there's so much of
Oh,
that
you mean with like Iron Man 3 kind of
with
thing?
Iron Man
Okay.
3,
Yeah.
and then at what point do we start talking about Fing Fang Foom, like, as a
But
villain?
I'm not going to defend Iron Man 3, but it did give us Sir Ben Kingsley
Uh,
kind of thing,
I
who I
appreciate
adore. I
I
adore him.
I appreciate Shane Black. Like,
Yeah.
I I really enjoy Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. I I I have a problem with propaganda, and I haven't gone back to um, Lethal Weapon in a while. But I grew up on the Lethal Weapon movies, and I have a deep and profound soft spot for them.
Lethal Weapon 4 was mine, right? Chris
Oh,
Rock, Joe Pesci, and just there was a point in time my best friend and I were just quoting that movie nonstop, like all the time.
I had a friend
Yeah.
who was exactly like Joe Pesci in those movies, and when Lethal Weapon 4 came out, and the poor kid. I'll tell you about him at some point. He was from
AFT.
the guy was just a mess. But and he was a game master. He was my game master in college.
Okay.
And
Is it like a dungeon master or?
yeah, mostly we
Yeah.
played Star Wars together.
Okay.
But yes.
Yeah.
Um
Sorry, I
so
got us off track a
no,
little
it's
bit,
okay. It's
but
all right. That's part of what this is about. So going back to Space Quest, I think that the key to because so much of the Space Quest, especially in the early episodes, is about setting up puzzles. The whole thing is
yes.
about setting up puzzles, and that's true of the whole franchise. So there isn't exactly a through line. What I'm thinking is that you use the characters that were developed for the franchise, and you find stronger through lines that delve into the satire. So, for example, like my thought for season one was that the two guys from Andromeda are trying to retire, but they're game developers. And like they've been working in crunch for minimum wage for 40 years.
This
Like
isn't like a Last Starfighter or Galaxy Quest premise where it's like the action of creating it like kind of creates their own narrative. It puts them into the world kind of
I
thing.
think you get to brush that aside with Space Quest. I think you get to
Okay.
be cavalier, like, and just say yes and no. Like, so Roger Wilco, for
Sure.
example. So in this version of the story that I'm suggesting, the two guys from Andromeda are 40 years older, but Roger Wilco is the same age.
Okay.
And you say why, and it's like because he's a video game character.
Right, they don't
Like,
age.
they don't. Video game characters don't age. Like, it's just
No, they
that
don't
simple.
age.
So,
Yeah.
so,
Except
so
for like Captain Price from last week in Call of
right,
Duty. But
different franchise, right? We're dealing with a
yes.
different set of reality.
Yeah.
I think that Roger Wilco. We also have to talk about Roger's motivations. Um, but I think that he's gonna clean up the mess. I think Roger Wilco is going to say, "You're right. Like, we need to get you guys retired. We should do a television show about your game so that you can have money because you've been working in crunch for all this time." And so like Roger Wilco is
Really like honoring the fourth wall breaks and stuff like that.
absolutely. And so
Yeah.
but the problem is that they don't own the rights to their own stuff anymore, and it's all a mess. So Roger Wilco has to go find the villains and prove that these guys wrote them.
This
Like
almost feels like it could be like, and I'm not saying that this should or even needs to be like an R-rated thing, but it feels like there's a lot of like, not I don't want to say like tonal similarities, but just like love and crossover, like the same kind of stuff that like the original Deadpool had going for it,
yes. Yes, although
where it's like
Roger Wilco is
it's
a very different character. Yes.
honoring the art of itself kind of
Yes.
thing. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that so Roger Wilco's mission in the first season is to go find all these villains and basically build a rogues gallery for the series as a whole and prove that these were the guys that wrote them when like these guys really don't want anything to do with Roger. Like these are all people doing their own stuff, running their own scams and doing things, and Roger's like trying to bring it back to video game design and bring it
Yeah.
back to like, and it's going to be really hard. He's going to have to get these guys to agree to be in the show and be his villains and be his rogues gallery so
It's a
that
show about being in the show.
yeah, so that he can so that he
It's
and
very Inception.
that's where and that well, I think that that's very Space Quest. I think that that's very
Yeah.
Space Quest. And so you've got this great so you have episodic approaches to the whole series because you have like 12 episodes of him going and finding all these bad guys. And then
There's
maybe
there's a romanticism to it that is just like, I think it's incredibly difficult to pull off well,
Mhm.
but if one can pull it off, I think
Oh,
it's just
Federico's here. Hi, Federico. Let's just take a minute and
incredible.
update. Hi, Federico. This is what we're doing here is we're adapting video games to film. And right now we're talking about adapting Space Quest, which you may or may not. Federico is the art director and concept artist for Jump Rangers, if
Oh,
anybody's
that's
not aware.
awesome.
Yep. So the idea for Space Quest, the show, is that it's an animated series about, right now what's being pitched is Roger Wilco trying to go and get the villains of the whole Space Quest series to agree to be in the show and admit that they were written by the two guys from Andromeda, so the two guys can retire after 40 years of crunch at minimum wage. Like,
Yeah, and it's I mean, so I was, honestly, it is sometimes, especially in game dev
yeah,
or also like animated productions. As I said, like I'm good friends with the guy who was formerly the lead illustrator for Archer, and it is kind of disheartening sometimes to hear what their compensation is like.
yes, yes,
And that always so I don't want to name names because obviously he's told me things that I probably shouldn't like share
yeah.
just with the world. But like
People are vulnerable, and you don't want to expose people to.
yeah, I mean wonderful human being of a guy. I absolutely love him, and he did some concept art for me about a little more than half a year ago when I was doing development on my fantasy series. And I was talking with him. I was like, I'm not asking you to. I would never ask you to work for free. Let's try and figure out like a fair rate for you to do this concept art. And he was telling me, he was like, well, like normally I would be negotiating for as good a rate as I can, but like we're friends. I know him through Ninja Warriors. I've known him for like probably 10 years at this point.
Yep.
And he was like, but this is what the studio pays me to do my job, and I was just like, you're whating me. Like I was like, you can't be serious that this is what I mean. I would have thought you were getting paid, thousands of dollars per episode.
Hmm.
You're lead
No.
illustrator
Yep.
on an Emmy award winning television show,
Yep.
animated television show. How are you not like making bank and residuals and all that stuff? And it was really I mean I think the best word to use here is like disheartening almost to
It's
hear that like they're not why aren't these people being compensated for their incredible just dedication and work ethic and ability.
because the video game industry went from 0 to 60 so fast. Because like 20 years ago it was all entrepreneurial stuff, and it was just guys in closets trying to get away with whatever they could get away with as
like
design
like the
marketers
like
and
the
producers.
Undertale kind of phenomenon a little
And
bit.
well, so much of what, like, why are people in the film industry so, like, in independent film, so quick to exploit labor, so quick to put people's lives in jeopardy? Like, and what happens, it's the same thing's happening in film. And as the studios grow today, they are adopting those practices as best practices. They never get away from that, to the extent that
Yeah.
we were talking about stunts and how quickly the studios will put people's lives in jeopardy. It's the same phenomenon where, like, these people, it, people get celebrated for being able to create something from nothing, and they want to prove to people that they can do that, and all of a sudden Arya Tremaine says, "Hi,
That's
it's."
me. No, that's me. That's me. I'm
Oh,
Arya
okay.
Tremaine.
Oh, okay, okay. Um.
So it's the original lead female character from my fantasy series.
Oh, yes, of course. So they you know what I'm
I was
saying?
just, I was
Like,
just asking Federico if he
yep.
can elaborate in the chat on the design market having a vast range kind of. I didn't want to
Yes.
interrupt you. That's the only reason I put it
I
in the
think I
chat.
think he's saying I think he's saying, like, there's a whole. Correct me if I'm wrong, Federico, but I think what you're getting at is that there's a whole wide range of business practices, a whole wide range of, like, standards of of work ethic, and like people can be making, like you said, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year or more for doing work, or for the same work under a different leadership they might be making Nothing, shockingly. And I think if that's what you're getting at, Federico's first language is Portuguese, so that might be a
Amusingly enough, I think my friends as well.
yeah.
Either Spanish or Portuguese, yeah,
Yep.
one or the other. I think my friend probably answered this at one point because I probably would have had the same degree of like disbelief and consternation at hearing this back then as I do now. But I don't under are animators, are design artists not unionized? Are they not IATSE? I think they're not IATSE, but do they not have any
the
kind of
video
union? I
game
know
ind-
that.
the video game
Well,
industry in particular is looking at its
yeah.
first union right now. A transformer
Yeah.
redesign can reach about 1 million easily. So
Okay.
so it
And well,
depends.
was
Yeah.
that like production design or concept design? Like,
Yes.
because production designers are covered by IATSE, I believe. But um, and I know that like the all the people who work VFX, I think at like Disney and Marvel, well, Marvel is owned by Disney, so at
Yep.
Disney are trying to unionize, and
They
I'm
did
very
successfully. They
they
did.
did, yes, yes. So like that's great. I'm very much in support of that. But like that's not going to encompass
Nope.
animators. That's not going to
Blizzard,
encompass a bunch of people.
nope. Although animators, I think, are
Yeah.
Yahtzee. But
Right. And so like, and I know that SAG is striking right now for the contracts for video games
yep,
specifically,
Blizzard is
which I
in
assume is just the voice actors. But
Blizzard is in the process of unionizing right now. Blizzard employees are unionizing.
for
So
what?
for what?
Like is it just like which department is it just like
I
all encompassing just video game creators
I
like?
think it's a company wide union for
But it
video
would be
game
company
creators.
specific, like the way that
Yes.
like
Yes.
Disney's
Like
theme park employees have a union of their
Starbucks.
own.
Like Starbucks.
Okay,
Yes. Um,
okay.
but we'll see
It's
what
not like a
happens.
national or anything like that.
No, it would be great if there was, and that
Yeah,
could happen. If you get a couple of video game unions, they could at that point nationalize. You see what I'm
merge.
saying? They
Yeah,
could, yeah, exactly.
that's like how
So,
it happened with originally Stunts was its own union, got absorbed by SAG. I went back in
yep,
I think it was the '80s or something like that.
yep, that's
So
how it works. For
yeah,
movies, concept artists are kind of unionized. Okay, okay.
okay.
So,
Wow.
so
But clearly not for video games.
no,
So
and
or animated shows.
nope. And there's all kinds of yes, exactly. And and at the same time, you have sort of enforcing these quote unquote entrepreneurial business ethics, all this exploitative stuff. You have the power of a a of a global conglomerate now. In the case of something like Activision Blizzard, enforcing these very grindy, very exploitative business practices, as opposed to just five guys and one of them doesn't like the way things are going. Like you have, like it's no longer a conversation.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it's just like Microsoft. I don't. A lot of times, like, and I don't know if this is maybe too inappropriate for front of the house talk, but
mhm.
I don't understand how like with Steam, Microsoft. How does Microsoft not have a monopoly on like video? How is there not like some antitrust thing going on right now
Because
involving
I think
Steam
it's a
and
it's a
video games
it's
and
a legal distinction, I'm sure, but you have Riot with a launcher, you have Epic with a launcher, you have Blizzard with a launcher. Steam is just a launcher with a lot of content on it.
yeah, but
So,
if you're not literally like a multinational, if you don't have corporate backing,
mhm,
all your only choice is to release on Steam these days for the most part, right?
correct.
Like what else are you gonna do?
That's well,
Uh,
yes.
and so, and
S-
I mean, I've been hearing
People would say
really
itch.io,
disturbing.
people would say there's other,
Yeah, but I've been hearing really disturbing things about how the profit sharing works with Steam, kind of thing.
I follow Thor from Pirate Software at Pirate
Okay.
Software, and he's very good at breaking down how deals work. And he makes a very strong pro Steam argument. I don't think that the
Okay.
profit sharing from Steam is exploitative, based on what
Okay.
he said. And he is an indie game developer with a lot of AAA experience. He's somebody who
I was
is actually.
I'm not in the world. I all I can say is, kind of hearsay anyway. So if you have clearly have a good source, and if he's pro Steam, then I will reevaluate, what I
I
think about it. But
I think that it is very viable if you are doing the work to make money on Steam with a video
okay,
game. The problem with Steam is that there's so much content, and
yeah.
that is another problem that we wrestle with. But as a distribution platform, I don't think Steam is problematic. I think
Wish we
that
had like a Steam for independent movies kind of thing.
yeah,
I guess it's Amazon basically, but yeah,
and that's a licensing deal that is to get money on a streaming licensing deal in excess of your budget. You
yeah,
have to be you have to be you have to be a one in a million film. You really have to
yeah.
like change the numbers in some profound way. And the truth is that while that's possible, and while there are systems for doing that work, most people who are getting into film today don't know them. Most people don't understand how to sell tickets to things. And the whole point of streaming is to avoid the risk of having to do that in the first place. So there's a catch 22 there, and that's challenging.
Yeah, but
Um,
it's like the only way you build the streaming audience is by finding ways to sell tickets and generating that word of mouth. It is. It's a chicken and the egg problem.
so
Yeah,
so I think Steam is up against a lot of those similar issues, and I think that there's less of a vocabulary for that problem in video games because people aren't coming from show business as much, even as they are
right.
in today's film industry. I think that there's I think that people say this isn't fair and that's not fair, and yes, but I don't think Steam is part of the problem right now, and I'm not saying it can't become part of the problem.
Uh,
I'm convinced that it can, and
I
and
mean,
I
as it stands, I think anything that enables kind of the smaller fish to have a distribution platform has got to be a good thing, as long as it's not being like just outright exploitative.
and
Um,
there are a lot of video games that are finding life on Steam and finding an audience on Steam.
Well, it's
And
like Undertale doesn't exist without Steam, right?
nope,
Like so, and
there is an
Undertale,
update.
I think, is Undertale. I mean, honestly, and I'm talking about Undertale, even though I've never played it, but I've heard about it from so many people and so many good things about it that, like, honestly, it's wonderful that someone can. To me, Undertale is kind of like the whole someone was rewarded for their dedication to the craft and their skill, and they didn't have to just like glad hand their way to get a shot
Well, you want to
kind of
see
thing.
like an amazing Steam success story. Like to me,
Yeah.
Cuphead is a correct is an example. Like I don't
What is
think
it?
Cuphead,
I don't know this one.
which Cuphead's a platformer. Oh, Greg, you love it. It's okay. We're just gonna take a second. Now it's they went ahead and they got themselves into I think a PlayStation deal, and they
Okay.
had other stuff. But I don't think their development would have happened if they couldn't have started on Steam. I think that Steam opens the door for stuff like this. Just take a minute and run an internet search on Cuphead. We'll wait. We'll wait.
Uphead, you said?
Cuphead. Yep.
Oh goodness, the kitten is dreaming.
Mhm.
Is it two words or one word?
One word. One word.
I have to type without disturbing the kitten.
They've got a Netflix series now. They've got all kinds of stuff. But this is a game that
Available on Xbox One.
yeah, and they got an Xbox deal, but
Oh, it's
it's
a run and gun.
no. Look at the art for a second.
Yeah, I mean, it's very like Mickey Mouse, like
It's very trippy.
1950s, 1960s, like Betty Boop and stuff like that.
It's definitely got a 1920s animation style, but it has
Oh yeah.
1970s animation content. It's very head shoppy. It's very it's very Felix the Cat, and it's just utter psychedelic.
This looks awesome.
And it's very hard. It's notoriously hard. You would love this game, Greg. This
Did
is
you did you ever play Noida? Have you ever
I haven't
have you ever
I've seen Noida streams. I haven't played Noida.
Yeah, I still am of the opinion that Noida is the hardest game ever made, but I mean, obviously, I have not played nearly enough games to really have a real opinion on that. But this is awesome.
I I
This
I,
looks
I know you'd like
so
it.
cool. This looks so cool.
So
Yeah.
Steam does make things like this possible. Um, and I there's I forget where I got. I think my Space Quest stuff is on Steam. I have a lot of stuff on Steam. No Man's
Nice.
Sky. There's a lot of opportunity for
Oh
indie
well,
games.
look. All of the games I play now, I have to get them from Steam,
Yeah,
kind of thing, because it's like I like having CDs, right? I'm a weird guy. I'm a '90s kid. I like having the C like I still have my original Final Fantasy VII CDs, kind of
yeah.
thing. For the computer. But I mean, I understand. We're in a digital age now, and people would rather just have it in ones and zeros, less storage, less things you have to, keep track of. But yeah, I mean, it's the only way now to kind of get games is Steam, which is why I'm just like, it feels like it's a monopoly.
It is, and
Speaking of monopoly, that would be a heck of a movie to make, right?
but I think
Actually, they might
I
have made a movie about
no,
that.
but they did try. There
Yeah.
was a movie. It was in the 2000s. It was supposed to be directed by Ridley Scott, and
Okay.
it was one of those Alice in Wonderland clones. It was one of those like, oh, this person, this dad or somebody he finds himself stuck in Monopoly World for some reason, and so
Right.
on and so
Yeah,
forth.
yeah.
And
They inserted a storyline into the world rather than like building a storyline with the world kind of thing.
I get so frustrated. Alice in Wonderland is not a good movie.
Yeah.
It's not a good movie, and it's because you're dealing with a passive reactive character. It's about a character on a conveyor belt being pushed through all these experiences until they
Which is
have
of course literary masterpiece,
yep,
but
yep. It
cinema,
doesn't work. It doesn't work.
oh
You can't have the
goodness.
story happen to the character. You can't have
Stretchy boy.
catharsis. Characters have to change themselves and so on and so forth. And so
Right.
there's no and I've been a party to content that there was a Paul Bunyan movie in development for years that was very much about like this kid who was lonely gets trapped in Paul Bunyan's world and became friends with Paul Bunyan and learned the value of friendship from Paul and Babe the Blue
Yeah,
Ox. And
yeah,
it's
it's
like,
it's it's kind of a shame because like one of my favorite movies when I was much younger was like the Disney movie, A Kid in King Arthur's Court with
yes,
there was some Kate Winslet was in that movie, I think. Um and it was, I don't remember if it was Kate Winslet. The older sister was turned into a very notable actress. Daniel Craig is in that movie. Everyone forgets Daniel Craig is in that movie,
yep.
but it is very much like that's a kids movie because it's like it's very passive, and it's just the kid who ends up being Kevin. Or he's either Kevin in that movie or Kevin in American Pie. I can't remember. Um, but and like again, based on the book Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, and as a book, probably great.
It's a great
I
book.
haven't read it. Yeah,
But then you look at the attachment that people have to movies like that versus
yeah,
the attachment that they have to something like The Goonies. And
yeah.
and the thing about The Goonies is that they went looking for treasure. They went looking.
I,
They made the pirate ship real through their efforts to find it.
yeah,
And ultimately, it's not a perfect script, but it is a lot stronger for that reason than a lot of these other projects that come along, and it works a lot better for that reason. And apart from that, it's basically the same thing. Like
right,
they get stuck in an underground world that's pirate land. Like, but it's not what happened. They went looking for treasure, and through their efforts to find the treasure, they ended up attracting the attention of criminal elements who also wanted the treasure. Like they got themselves in more trouble than they knew what to do with, and they wound up on this big adventure because they were trying to accomplish something that they had
right.
no business trying to achieve. And so, you know, going back to Space Quest, like for me, the trick to Roger as a character is that first of all, we don't ever hear him speak. He doesn't really have a lot of interaction, like at least in the first three games.
This was
And,
still like back in the era where like the character you're playing never has dialogue,
yep,
right?
yep.
Yeah.
Um, that is less the case in the future games, but I don't.
Why did they do, why was that a just like from game design? Why was that a thing? Was it meant to be so that like the person playing the character could fill in the blanks in their own head kind of thing? Was it a way to make it more immersive?
I think no, it wasn't that deliberate. I think that game development and game design was still in its infancy, and I think the story was very much a vehicle to present you with Gordon Freeman is like this. Yes. Um,
The problems to solve
that's
kind of
right. To
thing.
present you with the gameplay. It was
Okay.
all it was all it was all very much like a spoonful of sugar with your thing and just to tie it together. So I think they
Right.
had
It was a way to ground the gameplay, not the other way around, where the gameplay
yes.
is grounding the narrative kind of
That's
thing.
right. That's right.
Got it.
So so there's not a lot that we know about Roger, but there are a couple things that we do know about him. He always goes back to being a janitor. He's
Yeah, I
he's
remember that. Yes,
he's always he's always starting the story sweeping a floor or cleaning something up. And
or
and
mopping something. Yeah,
and it just turns out that there's a much bigger mess that Roger needs to clean up. And
yeah.
I feel like that's key to the character. I feel like Roger doesn't want to not be a janitor. He doesn't have aspirations. He's not like he loves his job. He likes I think I think Roger likes cleaning up messes and making things clean for people. And so when Roger finds out that there's a big mess, I think he's like, well, let me get my mop. Like, let me get my bucket. Let's like, and I think that um, there's there's a contrast between that and like the heroic figure that he cuts. They wanted him to appear like an action hero. They wanted him to appear like Steve.
It's every man to hero kind of
Yep.
thing. It's that beautiful trope of
So
and it's also like I always liked that as kind of a trope, just a narrative trope, because I felt like it is a good way to kind of build a connection with the audience. Because, like, most people in an audience, whether you're playing a game or watching a movie, you're probably an everyman or every
yeah,
woman, right? And it's like most people aren't just in kind of those, ends of the bell curve situations that are really, extraordinary, either in a positive or a negative way. And so
yep.
if you make the main character someone, oh, he's like us,
Hmm.
kind of thing, and then is like this guy gets to go on this grand adventure, which is like most people. I think anyone who plays a video game, you play video games. There's some degree of escapism, right? It's like we want
Yeah,
to become part of something that's not reality, and that's I'm not saying that that's a bad thing at all. I think there's nothing wrong with it as long as
yeah,
it's again in moderation, all things
yeah,
in moderation. But and that's one of the beautiful things about it is that it's such a good way to make the experience wholesome.
yeah.
And so and so it's like it's kind of a question, and it's also a question I had from earlier, but I think it also does kind of correlate. Like, to me, a lot of those early great games, the games that were really like on point with their game design, they had the ability to teach you how to play the game through the gameplay,
Yes,
rather than needing to give you a tutorial
yes.
or leaving you just totally blind. Like, there's this wonderful YouTube video that when we talk about like game design, I love to just link to people. It's called Sequelitis. They're only I think a couple installments because the guy self animated so much of it. But the best episode he talks about Mega Man X, which I have an extraordinarily high opinion of that game.
Hmm.
But he talks about how the brilliance of Mega Man X it really shines in how it teaches the player how to play the game through its game design. Like it puts you in these puzzle-esque situations, but that are low, like risk, where it gives you the time to figure
You
out
have to
what you
master
need
that.
to
You
do.
figure out what tools are available to you. Yeah,
Right, like the wall sliding, like jumping with wall sliding in Mega
yeah,
Man X. They put you in this pit with no bad guys. So
yeah,
there's no risk of you dying, there's no time urgency to it, but so you can figure out the gameplay
yeah,
while you're playing. And I think that's kind of integral to amazing game design. But again, as we've talked about, like games are meant to be immersive.
hmm,
Movies, shows, whatever, they are voyeuristic. So how do we create the same kind of appeal? Like, because you can't you
well,
teaching an
I think
audience
that
member what the character is capable of is
I
almost like exposition for exposition's
oh,
sake.
you don't need to do that.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that this is where there's a lot of similarities between writing for uh for a game and writing for literature, right?
Yeah.
So much of literature is about making observations to the audience. And in contrast to film, where the audience comes to watch, they want to make their own observations, right?
Right.
But most authors, I say most, but a healthy portion of authors will create specifically a passive protagonist in the interest of having an observer to make observations, so that they have like a foil through which the author can make observations about the world and start identifying themes. They,
Well, and
they
like and the human experience,
and the human
as it were.
yes, the themes and
Yeah.
everything else, exactly.
Yeah.
So so I think video games come from that place of one of the things we need to observe is the game mechanics themselves.
Right.
And and they just find a way of doing that through the observational passive reactive character. They've got a character that they are putting in these situations, and much like back in the day, much like Sierra, so much of we just had this conversation with Modern Warfare. Solve this puzzle, and
Right.
then here's a story justification for why you need to be in this puzzle, and here is a reward for putting you in this situation. And the story kind of functions as that carrot and that stick.
Yeah.
And and certainly that's true in StarCraft as well, without question.
It's true in all of the good video games, I would say.
Yep.
Yeah.
And except for those in really effective games, I think, have gotten good at weaving those rewards into the gameplay, so there's not as much of a clear delineation between, like, it's more immersive because you're not getting broken necessarily.
It's got to be like kind of easier in like non-linear gameplay, right? Where it's like, you have more freedom to kind of act as one would in the world,
Well, I
almost.
think
And that's well, and interestingly enough, I do think that that is some of the beauty of the Sierra RPGs, right? Because
yes,
yes, there's a
yes,
linear storyline, and it
yep.
very much does progress from A to B to C, but in between those kind of like dots or those checkpoints,
You meet characters, you do all these things.
yeah, you can do whatever you want, and you can do things that kill you that have nothing to do with
Yep.
the actual gameplay. And it does give you kind of a sense of autonomy that is
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
again, I'm going to keep going back to the word like romantic in a way.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. So the key here is just focusing on the efforts of the character to accomplish their goal, as opposed to the situation that the character is in. Roger
Right.
Roger is trying to clean up the galaxy. His mission is to clean up the galaxy.
Like literally though, like make it shiny and spotless,
I
like
think,
clean.
yeah, exactly. He
We're
wants
not talking about like, the war on drugs or any, no, we're talking about literally like with a mop, like
he wants
cleaning.
it to be a nice place for people to live.
Yes.
Like, that's Roger's goal. It
Hmm.
has to be. And I
I've
think
asked you this. I've asked you this question before, but like, I think have a character has to have a very like specific and concrete goal that they can just pursue with everything they have in their being. I'm
yes.
absolutely on board with that, but with a goal like this, and I'm just always like, isn't it more like, I don't want to say better, but doesn't it offer like perhaps a greater range of opportunity for like the actor and all the people in the production if the goal is actually something like attainable rather
It
than just like it's like and we talked about this sometimes with like the Avengers and so like
Yep.
superheroes, what are their goals, right? They're very reactive and their goals are like to fight injustice, and stuff like, but like how do you fight in, like, you can't
Well,
win
the goal of
against
Avengers,
injustice.
the first movie, was to build the
Yeah.
team.
Well, yes,
Was to build a first responder unit.
but that was like Nick Fury's goal,
And
right?
yes, but his goal is the arc of the movie. Nick Fury is the protagonist of that movie.
Okay, yeah, you know what? I'll buy that. That
Um,
it's an interesting interpretation, but I don't see any reason to disagree with that.
who's the
So
first character? Loki and Nick
in
Fury in
well, yeah, I
Avengers.
mean, it's the Norwegian scientist played by
Yep.
Henrik Skarsgård or
Yep.
whatever his name was,
Henrik
but
Stellan.
it's Henrik Stellan. Thank you. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I love that actor, by
I'm
the way. I love him so
I
much.
love him. Oh, dude, him in Andor
He's
is
wonderful.
oh
I
my goodness.
I
Yeah.
had hoped that character was going to reveal himself to be General McCracken. I was
Oh, from Andor?
I don't know how familiar you are with the Star Wars role playing game, but
Not super, but I mean, look, the second season of Andor is supposed to be coming out later this year. So,
but Dave Filoni has borrowed so heavily from Star Wars
yeah.
the role playing game material. Like he goes for deep cuts, and General McCracken was the head of Rebel Intelligence in all of the source books, and he appears in the comics.
Okay.
He appears in the like. So I was like, and he looks like McCracken. I say
Yeah.
McCracken. I think it's just General Kraken actually.
All right. Well,
Um,
I mean, look,
I was
I
so
again, I have to take your word for it, but that seems very
uh,
plausible to me.
I thought so, but at this point, I think he's well established enough that he's not Kraken, and it's
It's not.
Filoni.
I mean,
Why?
but if you consider that, like, he's clearly this whoever this
He's a deep
the
cover
character
operative. He's
actually is.
not being truthful. Yeah, he's deep cover.
Well, it's the thing. He has so many different identities, right? And
I
he's very
hope
much an
so.
unreliable narrator.
He is. He is. And at the same time, like
It
at this
totally could
point,
be.
yeah. But if you didn't drop it by the end of the first season, I feel like
Why not though?
I don't
Why
know.
not though? I mean, I
It
mean, you know, eh, the only thing that I can really like is there is clearly a direct line between Andor and Rogue One, kind of thing. And the
yes.
fact that we don't see his character in Rogue One, and I don't know the lore the way that you do, but it is like I think that there obviously has to be more that meets the eye here because we even see Saw Gerrera in Rogue One kind of thing,
Right.
and the if we I don't know it doesn't seem to me
Hmm.
a stretch at all that I'm sorry, Henrik Stellan, is that what his name is? I'm sorry.
Stellan Skarsgård. Yeah.
Stellan Skarsgård. Stellan Skarsgård. Does he have a brother that's Henrik?
Nope. I don't know.
There is a brother. I know he has a brother
A
that also
son.
acts.
A son.
Oh, a son. Okay. But it wouldn't honestly. I would
Peter
say it's
is his
totally
son.
plausible that he either creates a new identity or like again he's like what this high end
Yep.
antiquities dealer on Coruscant, right? So
Right.
maybe like that, and that's the identity that we like know him as
Yeah.
in Andor. But like
I
that
agree.
could totally be a fake identity
I
kind of thing.
agree. I was waiting for it all the way through the
Yeah.
first season. There was a lot of episodes.
Mm,
Three sons, says Federico.
there you go.
He's
So
got
I
three
think
boys.
I think there is a Henrik in there somewhere.
There might be. There might be.
Yeah.
So
But
Roger,
sorry, I got off track.
no
I'm talking
worries.
about space. Roger Wilco.
So the thing with Roger is he's the one who's taking care of these messes. So like I could see him. He's in the opening scene. He's trying to clean up a really big mess and just doing something gross in space, and then he's like satisfied. He's gonna go talk to his friends and check in. Floki, Tarzan, and the Thing is what? Oh, okay, those are the three boys. Okay.
Okay.
Um.
Okay.
So he's he's gonna go and check up on his friends and maintain his relationships, polish everything, right? Polish every little thing. So he would call the
Yep.
two guys from Andromeda. He'd be like, "How's it going?" And they're like, "Oh, not good, Roger." Like, you know what I mean? And he's like, "Well,
Yeah.
I've built up like 75 years of vacation time, like,
Mhm.
like,
So he's working for them, or is he working for?
no, he's just because he's just got like a space job, like you just start with
He's
him
like
like cleaning up
he's
puke on
like
the outside of a spaceship or like
freelance. He's a freelancer. This is like the whole Star Citizen. Pick your jobs and pick your journey and your
yes.
missions. He's doing freelance janitorial work across the gap. I
Yeah.
love that as just an idea. It's
Yeah.
like
That yeah.
it and honestly, it just gave me this great idea,
He's
right?
like the
Like
private
if you're
investigator
doing,
of he's like the private investigator of janitorial
well, I was gonna say if you're
services.
doing a trailer, right, and we were to make a trailer for this,
Yeah.
you construct it like it's the Mandalorian, right?
Yeah.
Like the bounty hunter kind of feel. You
Yes.
set it up with that
Yes.
dramatic tension,
Yep.
and then it just and it's like kind of the Deadpool-ish reveal where it's like he's floating outside and he's like sometimes you come across a wreck and you don't know what
Yeah.
disasters happen and he's just like
Yep.
cleaning off blood from the outside of a window or
Yep.
something like that.
Space is
Squeak.
dangerous. Space
and
is
and and,
messy. Someone's
and
got to
like
clean it up. Like Wilco
exactly.
Janitorial Services.
Exactly. Weird physics question. This is a little bit of my ADD brain asking. Obviously, there's no sound in space because there's no vibrations. But if you were cleaning the outside of a window,
Hmm.
on like a space station, and there was some kind of physics friction that would cause there to be squeakiness, would you hear squeaky on the inside of the ship?
Yes, because the
You
window
would.
is vibrating.
Okay. Well, but if it's like a double pane thing, then you wouldn't.
Yes. Well, depends on yes, but let's say they're
Okay.
let's so yes.
Like an airplane window, like you wouldn't hear the squeaky.
Not theoretically, but depending on how old the airplane is. Yeah. So you would want,
We
but
do some Hollywood magic with that
yeah,
one.
no, no,
You
no,
can
no.
hear,
Just
hear
let
the
it. Yeah,
squeaky.
like exactly, exactly, exactly. Like the 100% that. Yes, and so Rogers, and that's Rogers' goal is to just make it clean and nice for people. And like he finds out that it's not clean and nice, like in the games industry.
And you can do like the sex appeal thing too, where it's like he's cleaning the squeaky window, and the woman walks out of the shower or something like that in just a towel, and starts like hucking things at him at the window, and stuff like that. He has to like go away and not get to finish his cleaning, kind of
You
thing. And
want to
there's
go
just so much fun you can have with
there.
this.
The whole yes, the world of Space Quest is very forgiving. What what we want to do though, like when it comes to visual gags, like and when it comes to bits,
Yeah,
you have to take the Finding Nemo approach here. Like, don't.
I want to take the Deadpool approach.
Yep, I know, but that's not the. But I think it's stronger to just get in it. Like let someone else come in with an action. Like, there's a what was that a Henson event, and we were talking about Idea Guy, which is the new
Right.
Idea Man, the new documentary that Disney Plus did about Jim Henson's life, which is
Yeah.
directed by Ron Howard, by the way. Like,
Oh, okay.
highly recommend check out this documentary. It's
That seems like a very appropriate person to direct it,
it's also one of
honestly.
the only times anyone has ever gotten Frank Oz to sit down for an interview.
I did not know that.
He's an
I will have
incredibly
to,
he's an
yeah, I'll have
incredibly
to check that
private
out.
guy. He's not
Yeah, yeah,
he's
yeah.
quiet, he's reserved, and they managed to get him one of the, like
What
those.
what rating do you see as the Space Quest being, if it were to be like rated kind of thing? Is it clearly not going to be rated R, but is it okay to be PG-13? Are you trying to make it more of a G?
No,
So
I
that, like kids can watch
well,
it.
I think that I don't know the TV rating system, but I think
Let's
that
just for
yeah,
argument's sake, let's just assume like
yeah.
yeah, it's like TV, teen, TV,
Yeah.
MA,
I
whatever.
think
Yeah,
I
forget
think
that.
that
But
I
like
think that
in movie terms.
Space Quest should be safe for kids,
Okay.
but it should have adult humor. So I think that
It's like kind of like the older Disney movies where a kid would never understand the adult humor in them. Um,
but I also think there's a more artful way. I think there's a way to elevate the content here and do the things that because the two guys from Andromeda, like we said, were building rationalizations for puzzles, and they were really good
right.
rationalizations, and they had a great sense of communication with the player. They did all these wonderful things, and at the same time, what we understand about scene work is is something that gives us the opportunity to make a better television show. And if we do that, then it opens the door. Let's say this is a Netflix show to licensing King's Quest and licensing Police Quest and licensing these other content pieces like
Right.
Manhunter and other Sierra games. Um, so to me, the thing here is to say, okay, so for example, with gags, like we know that there's a difference between observational humor and action humor, right? The difference between stand-up comedy and sketch, for example, is
Yes.
is stand-up comedy is all about making it up.
Observational.
Yep, saying here's
Yeah.
something that's about
Yeah.
true about the world, and
Right.
and sketch is about giving a character something absurd to do and letting them commit all the way to it. Which Roger
Right.
Wilco has an absurd mission. Like he's trying to save the galaxy from janitorial services. It's stupid.
Right.
It's going to be funny.
It's amazing.
Um,
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. It's like what comedy is just the comedy and drama are totally interchangeable. It just has to
mhm.
be it's executed kind of thing. It's just like make it as outrageous and as full tilt efforts to do that. And that's kind of like correct me if I'm wrong, but like that's very much the line that like It's Always Sunny took with their characters, right? It's like we're gonna give them like things that could be done dramatically, but they're just going to try to like
Do them the
so
wrong
hard
way.
and
They're
so
gonna try to do them the
yeah,
wrong way.
exactly.
Comedy is an actor pursuing an action with 200% commitment for which they are horrifically ill-equipped. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
One of the things that I always end up talking about in comedy is Eddie Murphy's career, of course. People
Yeah.
forget that when it comes to his movie stardom, Eddie Murphy's first movie was not Beverly Hills Cop. Eddie Murphy's first movie was 48 Hours.
Okay.
And
When did Welcome to America fit into all of that?
after Beverly Hills Cop.
That was after Beverly Hills Cop. Okay.
So 48 Hours did not make Eddie Murphy a star. Everyone hired him because they knew he was ready for it and this and
Funny.
that. But he was a stand-up comic in a Nick Nolte movie.
Right.
And then Beverly Hills Cop came along, and in Beverly Hills Cop, he's not doing bits. In Beverly Hills Cop, he is a police officer with no actual investigation skills. He actually only has the skills of a con artist, of a street hustler, and he's going to go perform an investigation that he's been denied access to in the most anally retentive district in the country. And when everybody says something to him, anybody tries to stop him, whether it's criminals or cops or anybody tries to put a stop to this nonsense, he hustles them.
Yeah.
The whole thing is him doing the wrong thing to get what he's trying to achieve with total commitment, to the point where he eventually hustles the whole police department.
It feels like very much like Better Call Saul kind of
Yes.
lately, in what Odenkirk does with
Yes.
Saul in those earlier seasons, kind of
This
thing.
is not a person who should be responsible for anybody's legal well-being. Period.
Right.
Like you know, Finding Nemo, going back to that movie, is about a clownfish with a fear of open space is going to swim across a whole freaking ocean to save a kid from a fish tank in a dentist's office. And it's like, do you know what a fish tank is? Nope. And off he goes. Like, finds the only fish in the ocean as bad at this as he is and doubles down. That's his whole deal. Like, and so
It is a father-son dynamic, though. I mean, I think it's very justifiable, kind of
I'm
thing.
not saying it's not, but the clownfish solution to his problem is to go back to the sea anemone, find a pretty clownfish, and make some Nemos. That's how clownfish solve this problem.
Oh, like naturally, that's like
Sorry for your loss, Marlin. Like.
Yeah, I mean, it's like no kid, and I think actually not even many adults are going to understand the intricacies of like clownfish behavior, kind of thing.
But what I'm saying is, like, your point to the fact that he's his son and the fact that it's a human problem, that's a motivation to pursue.
It's a good way of saying it. It's a human problem. It's not a fish problem. It's
Right.
just it's a human problem being told through the filter of fish.
Right. He has a fear of open spaces, for crying out loud. Like, this is the last thing that Marlin should do.
Right.
Right. Charlie Chaplin is going with the theme
Love
last
Charlie
night.
Chaplin.
Well, the people don't realize this, but the Henson Studios was built on the United Artists lot. It was built by Chaplin, and they have a lot of archival material from those days. They inherited a lot of Chaplin archives.
Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, right? It's pretty much the fathers of stunts.
So where is his the best movie, I think, inarguably, that Chaplin made was City Lights. And what is City Lights about? It's about a homeless guy trying to pay a blind girl's rent. Pay your own rent. Like, and he's like, no, it's fine. I'm gonna ask my rich friends for money. You don't have rich friends. like that's City Lights in a nutshell. Like, he's gonna go and take care of this, and it's like, you can't take care of yourself.
So horribly romantic, though.
It is. It is, and of course it's tragic in the ending and all this.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's about somebody doing something for which they are horrifically ill-equipped with maximum effort, and that's comedy in the hands of an actor every single time. So when it comes to the ins and outs of the visual gags, like, if we're doing a visual gag, don't put the camera on it. Relax. Like, let the visual gags just be part of the world building, and let people go, wait a second, and freeze. That's how The Simpsons does it. They're not like, oh, look at this ridiculous thing that we drew. They're like, it's in there. It's in the frame. You'll see it or you won't. Like, moving on. Like, which is exactly how we should be doing that. And then when it comes subtlety, and then when it comes to, like, for example, the window wiping and someone behind the window, like, that character should be doing something they don't want people to see. It's
The
not just
character in the room.
it's not just that they're caught in a situation that makes them vulnerable, because that makes
Hmm.
them passive and it objectifies them as an actor.
Oh, it's like Dark Helmet with the dolls in Spaceballs.
Yes. Yes. So that's exactly right. Somebody at a desk doing something and Roger's cleaning the window and they're like, you know, like and Roger's like wiping the
Or
window. Like
knock on my door next time. Knock.
that's
Did you see anything? No,
that's
sir. I didn't see you playing with your dolls again.
well,
Good.
he's outside in space, so he can't even hear. So they're trying to communicate
Right.
these, and so then you get Roger trying to be like, "You got a clean window, like really clean," and the guy's like,
Just
"Where?"
like you just see like outside,
Yeah,
you know.
totally, totally. Like, and so they're trying to communicate two different things, and not that's a quid pro quo. What's it called? It's the yeah, quid pro quo. That's what it's called.
Well, is it quick? It's call and response too in there, I think.
But there's
But
but there's a but there's
yeah.
a there are two characters trying to communicate, have a conversation about two different things, and not realizing that they're having two different conversations, and
Okay.
you get this funny bit out of it, but it's buried in the action, and it keeps everybody humanized in that process, and we don't wind
It's
up.
also really great because it also allows for the depth of the characters. They can each be pursuing the things that they want
That's right.
without almost like without restriction or limit kind
And
of
we
thing.
are learning more about the characters that way. We're learning that Roger's kind of a doofus. We're learning that like he really loves cleaning windows. Like he really loves like he just wants to do a great job and be rewarded. And he sees how emphatic this guy is, and he's going to misunderstand that. And all of a sudden, you learn so much more. Like it gets, like you said, depth, because we're seeing Roger in a new light through the experience, as
He,
opposed
he
to just making
he
a quick
feels like
joke.
a very like B or C tier like One Punch Man hero kind of thing. Are
Yes.
you familiar with the
Yes.
analogy I'm making there?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
like he just like the goofiest like gimmick or whatever. He's a superhero.
He is a
Is he is
superhero.
he's actually a super he's a superhero through the filter of being a janitor
With no particular abilities, just a
with no
willingness
abilities.
with just a
Just
willingness
just
to do the work. That's his
an
superhero
incredible
power.
work ethic and an incredible passion
Yep.
and a sense of justice. It's just that the sense of
Yep.
justice is filtered through physical
Yep.
cleanliness
Yep.
or shine or aesthetic, shininess of its aesthetic or something, right? And it's just
Tonally,
he's a
like,
superhero.
and I'm not
I
saying
love
there's a
it.
spectrum here or a middle ground. I'm saying it's both
Yeah.
of these things. So I think that in
Yeah,
terms
duality.
in terms of the satire of it, there is a huge amount of like BoJack Horseman of like poking fun at the industry and poking fun at how things work. But there's also so much
To be fair,
She-Hulk.
BoJack Horseman is not a suitable for kids kind of
No,
thing,
no,
though.
no. But where it becomes suitable for kids is that like it's dealing with those themes and it's dealing with those issues, but through a very She-Hulk lens.
Yeah.
Like, because She-Hulk really is about like that goodwill, and she breaks the. People forget. Like people got so mad at the show, and it's like I know you never read the comic. I know you did. Dan Slott's initial run that defined the character, like,
Yeah.
is about her trying to solve all these huge legal problems that everybody's having, even to the point where she's like, she gets in gladiatorial fights because on Scar, of course, that's how they resolve conflicts. Like, there's all this kind of stuff, and then, at the end of it, like, it's all just becoming too much, and it's overwhelming her, and everything's coming down, and she's like, I gotta talk to the editor. This is
Yeah.
garbage. And she tears her way out of the comic and marches over to the editor's office and like strikes a deal with Marvel in the book,
Hmm.
like like faces down, and of course it's Stan, of course.
Right.
Like,
It's got to be Stan.
and she's like, look, old man, like this is this is this is nonsense.
I'm really
Like,
sad I never got to meet him before he died.
let's fix this. My
Yeah.
friend America Young, who's a director that you would
Oh, you
love.
were gonna say America Chavez, and I was like, wait a minute, you're friends with
No, no,
America
no.
Chavez?
America
Like, what?
Young. She's done a lot of TV work. She's done Damage and a bunch of other shows, and
Yeah.
she's a wonderful person. And everyone who works with her, she has done a shitload of actually stunt performance, and she's
Ooh, nice.
also done a shitload of mocap because of that.
Yeah,
And she's really well
a
known.
lot.
She was
Especially
Barbie in the.
LA and Atlanta, there's a lot of that
Yep.
where it's like if you're a good known stunt performer, like mocap is definitely something you get called for,
But she did
or at
a
least that's what I've been told.
a show for Stanley's YouTube channel for about 2 years,
That's
and
awesome.
she worked with him every day. Like, and she loved him. She had
That's
nothing but kind things to say about him.
I have never heard a single bad word about
He
Stanley
jumped in and
in my entire
supported her
life.
first feature film, like just jumped in. I think he even did a cameo, if I'm not mistaken. Um,
Yeah, like I mean, I remember hearing stories about how like the comics that he wrote back in the 50s and the 60s and stuff like that, they were really way ahead of their time in the messaging. And it's like, yes, of course there were
yes,
some things
yes.
that, were appropriate back then, which probably aren't appropriate now, but for the time it was
He
like,
believed in the autonomy of people, and he believed in
right.
the right of human beings to live their lives and
Yeah.
in peace and wellness. And he believed in entertaining people and giving them. Look, I don't know if we've talked about this yet, but on stream, but I have a definition of culture. I had a brain injury back in 2013. I was hit in the head with a sword. I wrote down everything I knew about show business over the course of the next 2 years because I was pretty sure I was going to wind up having a stroke or just dying. And I wanted to make sure that I gave my community what I could. And that
Right.
was something I could do right then. So the cool thing about that process, I wrote about 200 articles over that time, is that I started seeing patterns in the things that I knew about show business. And I really started whittling down kind of the axioms of what works in show business to some much simpler principles.
Sure.
And something that you and I have talked about, but I don't think on stream, is the working definition of culture that came out of that process, which is that culture is the body of experiences that people can choose to have in common. Because there's two kinds
Right.
of
It's the commonality of experience. Yeah.
Yep, because there's two kinds of experiences you can have when it comes to kind of human relations. There's something that happens to you that you don't really have any control over, and when we have those experiences with other people, maybe we'll understand their perspective, but we're not bound by them. If somebody lives in the
Right.
same city as
It's
you, or if they're forced into the same situation, the truth is you might still mug that person because you're hungry. Like,
yeah, the low hanging fruit comparison for this is like 9/11,
yeah,
essentially,
it
which
doesn't
is
give us
yeah.
anything exactly. It doesn't give us
Right.
anything.
It's just it's something to rally around, but there is aside from just being an event that we can only react passively to, there's no other
It
commonality
doesn't teach us
to it.
things about the people who share that experience. Whereas,
Correct.
if somebody chooses to do something that you did, then you
Yeah.
know that person has certain things in common with you, whether those things be interests, whether those things be whatever, like
Yeah.
perspective. You can assume that they're going to understand certain things that you like or certain things that you know. They may know those same things, or they may like those same things, or have similar reasons for liking other things. You have a basis for communication. So the quality of the culture, the quality of the, like, whether it's religion, whether it's a book or a movie that you like with someone else, if you went to the same college, anything that you chose to do in life, and someone else also chose to do, you can assume that they're going to have. You can talk to them about the not just that particular thing, but the mechanics that go into that thing, and all kinds of other things that you maybe they like this or that because they did this, and so that understanding of what information that person might be able to digest forms the basis of your relationship in terms of what you're trying to achieve together. If you're going to try and do something, if you're going to make a video game, you're not going to call random people that you know. You're going to call people that also have tried to make, or maybe people who have done like art or this or that. So are people who are in it.
You're not talking about like getting like the financing for it. You're talking about the actual creation of the
Yes, you're
game
going to
itself.
find
Yeah.
people, even in financing. Like if someone has money who likes the same things you like, that's the person you're going to call.
Oh yeah, of course.
Like, so our culture determines the things that we try to do with each other,
Yeah.
and the strength of our culture.
The things like in kind of layman's terms, are like the things we can bond over, essentially.
Right,
Yeah.
and the things that we are willing to risk and ask for help with risking because of that. If
Yeah.
we have a community around us that can support this, we're going to try and do that. Stanley believed in giving people better culture. He believed in giving them the opportunity to have shared experiences that matter to them so that they can go and do other things. Nothing made Stan happier than seeing other people make art and seeing other people tell stories. Nothing made him happier ever in his life. And knowing that he had helped, like,
You say something like that, and then I'm just like, oh man, I still have so much work to do on myself. Like,
well, it does take
oh,
a lot, and I understand how Stan got to that point. I've hit a point in my career where that is the primary driving goal. Like, yes, I have stories I can tell. I don't have stories I need to tell. Like for me, like Jump Rangers is important because
Is it?
it's a tool.
I, I understand that this is like again kind of getting beyond the scope of what we're talking about. Is it like I don't want to say like a shortcoming or a flaw or anything like that, but is it less than ideal to have stories of your own that you feel compelled to share with the world?
No,
'Cause I mean, like somebody's gotta, right?
yeah,
We can't all just be like we want to help other people tell their stories because
no,
then no one's ever telling a
and
story,
I
right?
have so and I don't often find people who tell stories better than me. So it does take a lot for me to want to invest in someone else's content. Like 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 apart from and that we're talking about degrees here. I invest tons in other people's content. I am constantly like so. But here's what I will say: prioritizing those stories
Yeah,
should come down to how those tools work and what you can achieve with them, as opposed to what your own ego demands of you.
right. Yeah,
And
well, yeah. Ego is the thing that has to be eliminated from the equation at all phases of the
because
creative process.
and for me, like I devoted a huge amount of time to the development of a movie called Quantum Theory, which is a super fun movie. And people tell me
It's
like,
the one you told me about. You
yeah,
spent like 10 years
and people are always
like
like,
on
"Oh,
it.
why did you
Yeah.
stop?" And it's like because the value of the tool was diminished. Because what I
Right.
was trying to achieve with it, like, and now someone else can use a great script. I love the movie. I think it can be a fantastic film. I don't doubt that.
Yeah.
But that's not the only thing I was trying to do. And the truth is, that's not enough. There needs to be. Sid LeMay once famously said, "You only need one reason to make a movie." I think you need at least two. And I think because it's too much work. Like
Well,
it's
can you elaborate on that like a little bit?
well,
Like what are the things?
he was like, you're getting paid. You want to work with this person. You want to work with that person. Make the movie. But I think he was in a situation where he was being offered opportunities, and I agree. You need a good reason to say yes. But like making a
Must be
movie,
nice to be in a position where when you have the kind of like the range to say no,
that,
kind of thing.
yeah. And I think
That's my definition of like knowing when you made it is when like you can actually sit down and consider saying no,
yeah,
kind of thing. You've made it if you're at that point.
that's true. I think so.
Yeah.
And I think. Well, then again, I do say no at this point. Maybe I have made
Yeah.
it. I don't know. I
I mean, look, you're doing stuff that's being circulated at a major play. I won't say it just in case I'm not supposed to, but like
yeah.
you're writing stuff that's being circulated at a major studio right now. So I mean, like, maybe you haven't like made it period the end, but you're certainly like you're only 1 degree of separation from it at this point, right? Like,
I don't. My goal
yeah,
in my career right now is to reach audience members consistently in a way that changes the culture for the better. And the reason Jump
yeah,
Rangers is so much of a focus for me, as we were talking about, is that like it's the tool that does the job. It's a scalable thing with huge amounts of appeal, and I can start working on it where I am now and build this tabletop role playing game and do all these other things that I'm doing now, and get to a point in the future where gameplay is appealing to me because it builds habits. In terms of giving
right.
the audience something to connect over, like giving them habits changes the way people do everything that they do in life.
Dungeons and Dragons has so much success in my opinion in part because of the kind of the ease of the structure, right? It's very simple. Like there is a defined role for the game master. There isn't like this whole thing where like people have to sit around and decide who's going to be the banker
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing for the game. Like there 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 are these
It
kind of
and it
defined roles.
learning the game of Dungeons and Dragons is tricky. There's a lot
Right.
to it. But what I will say is it gives people so much empowerment over the content, and it gives them so much of a role in what
Because of the I was saying then
because
that
of
is because
yep,
of the structure. Yeah, and that's nice. I think that's like
I agree.
something that's very people are appreciative of it,
And they get
right?
and by the time you become a hardcore Dungeons and Dragons player, you have committed so much time and effort and energy and creativity to the process that like you're not going to stop playing. So the other value of building a tabletop role playing game is that the people who do find their way into the game are going to be there with you all the way. And
Yeah.
that and
Assuming you have a good game.
assuming you have a good game, which I do, frankly.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm not
yeah.
questioning it.
No, I'm
I'm just
just
saying
I'm just
that is necessary to
this
it.
is a forward facing, like, let me go ahead and own that
Yeah.
in public and say
Yeah.
yes, it's a very, very good game, and I know that I've
My
played it
my
enough.
movie is a very good movie.
Yep. And and then going from there and building other games that get people into gameplay that empowers them and gives them habits that are going to help them own their future and own their lives, as opposed to habits. So many games
Build the
today,
culture.
yeah, yes, yes,
Build the
and
culture.
build the culture, and
Yeah.
and and part of the reason why I'm such a stickler for structure and why I abhor shortcuts as much as I do is because getting, for example, the shower scene, getting a quick laugh out of a booby joke may not be outside the purview of Sierra. It is outside the purview of Space Quest, but
Well,
but
I mean, yeah, like Leisure Suit Larry. I mean,
yes, but
that's
it's a missed opportunity for the culture. It
fair.
like, and there is a better scene, and it's like it's a throwaway gag. Yes, there's a better
Do you
throwaway gag.
do you risk alienating people even if you are, like, to a degree subtextually trying to raise the bar of culture?
No, no,
Okay.
because better scene work trumps um
Yeah, you're right.
like
Quality supersedes everything.
quality supersedes
I
everything.
I I I have to believe that, because if that's not true, then I won't succeed in what I'm doing in
And
life. So,
the whole Darth helmet joke that you made, like, is
yeah.
true. Like, there is an opportunity to make a better joke that is still tonally and contextually perfectly in keeping with,
What would the joke be? I'm curious.
well, whoever's behind. Like, I think you're right, someone's trying to play with their desk toys, somebody's having a wash moment in
Oh, I meant
Firefly.
specifically
like
the joke in
like
Spaceballs,
yes, or
specifically.
whatever, just as a, or what,
Yeah.
or something similar, like maybe something compromising in a more innocent way or whatever. Like, and there's Roger cleaning the window and embarrassing this person, and this person's like trying to get Roger to go away, and Roger's like, just like you know what, this is just needs
Oh,
this little extra.
not have it be like, "Okay, I interrupted your embarrassing thing. I said what I need to do, and now I'm going to leave." You would have there be more of an exchange
It
kind of
doesn't.
thing
It can be
to
quick.
heighten it.
It can be quick. It can be a throwaway. It can be a quick, like, three cuts. It could be even
Sure.
three cuts of, like, we cut back to Roger, and Roger being like, all clean, like we get the joke's over, but it's already a better joke than the person getting out of the shower. Like,
Right, okay, yeah.
on top of it being more, we're only talking about, yes, we're talking about less than a minute of screen time, no matter how you slice it. But
Yeah,
but first of all, there's animators that are going to be buried in that less than a minute of screen time for
right.
like 3 days. Number
Yeah,
one. Number two, so let's give them something compelling to do. Two, like, we do have the opportunity to learn about the character here, and that's the kind of polish that, like, I would, and this is stuff like this is the whole reason why we only do 30 minutes for animation. It's the reason animation shows are limited, is because, like, you're going to be drawing this, let's get it right in the development process, let's nail it down,
yeah.
and then we go on and hand it off, having storyboarded it out, safe in the knowledge that, like, we're good, we're out, like, we don't need to think about this again. Structurally, we're on solid ground. We'll hand it to the animators, and they will offer us an animatic and make sure that the blocking is correct and that it looks right. And then we go into, and that's so much work. So getting it, you don't. Whereas in a television show, like, you can riff and say this would be funny, and somebody else says, you know what, this would be funny, and you're in a rehearsal setting and it's on the same set, so it doesn't really matter as long as you have the props on hand that you might need, or if you need to rebook a specific gag, and it's like, you know what, let's pick this up tomorrow and let's send the prop artist out for an iron so we can iron the shirt, and that will be great. Like, fine, but here we don't have the luxury of that. So
Right.
it becomes like, let's screw it down, so not tight but just perfect. Perfect. And that, to me, is all about structure. And no, if you stay truthful to the content, which the Darth helmet joke, it could even be Darth helmet, because this is Space Quest. Like,
This is like Vohall or something like that. I
oh
mean,
no, I am literally saying, why don't we get Rick Moranis? Like, because
will Rick Moranis even do things anymore?
he stopped acting because his wife died and he wanted to take care of his kids.
Right. That's. I remember hearing that.
I think you
Did
could.
did I hear something that they're making a Spaceballs 2 and he actually agreed to do it?
I wouldn't be surprised because his kids are older.
Let me look that up real quick.
I
See if I
think
can do
he's
it
in a
without.
place where, like, but I think my point is, like, Space Quest is all about it does make pop culture references. There's broken TIE fighters in Space Quest 3. There's all kinds of stuff flying around.
Yeah,
There's a
Spaceballs
Terminator.
sequel in development at Amazon MGM with Josh Gad starring, Mel Brooks producing, and I feel like I saw somewhere that Rick Moranis agreed to do it.
That's amazing.
Um, but I don't know. Maybe it was just what I was dreaming of. I don't know.
But my point is, I think
Time.
I think you could get him for a cameo for a day, pay him a cup, 15,000 to come in and do some voice work. He'd love
Yeah.
it. He'd love it. And that kind of stuff becomes very achievable. Like, and maybe not, maybe not. You know what I'm saying? Whether or not we want to build our own universe before we go to checking, but I don't know. That's a producing question. You know what I'm saying? That's a question for the studio. Do we
Yeah.
want to do we want to build our own intellectual property? Because the truth is, Space Quest does both. The first two Space Quests were entirely original intellectual property. The first two were all stuff that was made up for these games, all of it.
Right.
And then, as the graphics ability started becoming a little more robust, they started filling the frame and using pop culture references to expand on the shot composition because so much of the, as you said, because it was always a series of paintings, it was always loading in this and loading in that, and so any given frame needed to keep your interest, any given,
Right.
right, and so they would throw in foreground stuff and this and that and have all these jokes in there. And to be clear, like, I was 10 and 11 when I was playing Space Quest 3, so of course, like, having Tinker Toys in the salvage yard was hilarious to me. Of course it was. Like, that was amazing. Um, but I don't know that that's the crux. And so that's a kind of fine tuning question that we would want the executives to answer for us. Um, and always given the chance, I'm gonna say, let's do the original thing. Let's do the original thing. Let's have it be a space. It doesn't need to be Volhall. It could be someone who's. It could be Roger's boss. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
or somebody like whoever hired him, the client, like doing something like, and maybe there's even a joke about like the client, like, no, no, Roger, I meant clean up the mess.
Yeah.
And Roger's like, it's clean. And just writes the check. Like, and meanwhile behind him, like, there's like, I don't know. There's all kinds of different opportunities there. But that, how you go about that depends on, I think, what the streaming service would want
Yeah.
for the brand, because I think the Space Quest games support both takes. They actually do. I personally think the design work that went into the first two games was more elegant because it was forced to be so. I love those first two games. And I think that the third game was so referential. But then again, when it worked, it really worked. So, but then it was so referential. So referential. There
Well,
really isn't anything in that game that isn't borrowed, between the burger joint and the pirates are flying TIE
yeah.
fighters, and there's so much. There's a Terminator
I mean,
bounty hunter.
I am a little bit out of my league here because again, I only played the second one.
Yeah,
But you know, I don't. I hold the opinion that it's totally okay to be referential, and that I think
sure.
that, especially with adaptations, we should be a little referential because you do want to honor the original kind of thing. You
Right.
want to also appeal to the original fan base. You want to, how do you appeal to both the old and the new
My
kind of
question
thing?
is just which version of Space Quest is it? Is it the version with
but I
McDonald's
haven't put.
jokes?
I haven't played enough of them to be
Yep.
able to have a real opinion. I
So
can answer that question through the lens of King's Quest,
right.
but not Space Quest. I mean, for me, if you know, if I just take the quick side detour here and talk about King's Quest,
Sure.
um, it's really hard for me to say like how a King's Quest adaptation works because it's. I mean, obviously, both of the storylines are like they're basically serialized across the games. It's continuing storyline, although you can play them individually and still get the whole game feel.
Hmm.
But it's you know, I loved the aesthetic of six, because of how it introduced like you know there was more depth to the art and like three dimensionality to the art and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But then again, you know, like King's Quest V was just wonderful. In even God, did you play King's Quest V by any chance? I can't remember
I only
if
played a little bit of one.
a
I've
little
only
bit of
played one.
one. So the kind of the climactic battle or event, because again, it's not really a fighting game,
Yeah.
but the climactic event in King's Quest V is the whole premise of the game is that the young prince, who is Rosella's brother and you know the king's son, kind of thing, needs to find a woman to marry.
Okay.
That's the whole premise. Is he's going to be coming of age and he has to marry because you know that's a fantasy trope. And I don't remember how it goes. And I think it might actually be at the end of Rosella or something. No, maybe it's not that he has to. No, six is the one where he's chasing the woman that he needs to marry because he rescues her from the evil warlock at the end of King's Quest V.
I
I don't
see.
remember how he. Oh no, the warlock shows up and steals the castle. That's
Okay.
what he shows up. The opening cutscene of King's Quest V is the warlock materializes outside of the castle, waves his hands. The 8-bit or 16-bit sparklies do their thing, and the whole castle vanishes. And we discover that he has miniaturized it and is keeping it in a jar in
Okay.
his you know evil warlock lab. But the son, and so like the king, the queen, Rosella, they're all there. They're all
Hmm.
trapped in the castle. But the son was out, you know, riding his horse as a young prince is wont to do, kind of thing,
Yeah.
and comes back and sees the whole castle is gone, and the whole game is centered around him saving the family and the kingdom and everything. And so he you know the climactic scene is he's at the warlock's castle, which is high up in a mountain, I believe, or something. Um, and there is this woman he ends up saving in King's Quest Six. Is then he travels to her homeland to try and win her over, save her, whatever,
Hmm.
to get her hand in marriage. But the climactic battle is it's you versus the warlock, and you've discovered this kind of spell book, and you have to learn all you know like which spells. It's like a four-way rock paper scissors. You have to learn. You know, well, he transforms into that. I need to transform into this. Blah
I
blah
see.
blah blah blah. But there are these two like you remember like Jafar's staff in Aladdin, the Cobra head staff kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
like these two massive like cobra serpentine statues, and if you walk under them, or maybe they're guarding the gate, right? And if you try to walk through them, like the lasers come out of the eyes and they burn you to a crisp, kind
Like
of thing.
Neverending Story.
Sure, yeah, exactly. And but there's just such a again, it's that kind of like romantic feel, classical feel. I always say classical, and I mean classical in like literature, like classical literature feel to it, like you know Homer's Odyssey, right?
Okay.
Dante's Inferno, that kind of like the epic quest feel to it,
Hmm.
and in the storytelling, and so that is slightly lost in the sixth one because the sixth one is so focused on an internal. It's almost weird, right? And I'm just noticing this and speaking about it. It's like six, the character has a really active line of action, right? The prince
Yeah.
is going to the this woman's. It's an archipelago. It's an islands thing,
Hmm.
to try and win her hand. And he learns when he gets there that she's actually like betrothed to this evil, I suppose, like vizier or something, like kind of like a Jafar. And he, you know, discovers that he has to rescue her, and she doesn't even know he's there for most of the story, kind of thing. And but it's a very active line of action, whereas King's Quest V is very reactive. He's reacting to everything being stolen by this evil warlock. And King's Quest V, I would say, can maybe, from a narrative standpoint, is more interesting from the narrative standpoint. Um, for gameplay. But I think maybe for a movie, and it's interesting that I kind of just naturally gravitated to this, where I was like, King's Quest 6, I think would make the better movie. And now, oh my God, it's active versus passive lines of action. Maybe
Yep.
that's why I gravitated to it, as like say this would be the better movie.
Yeah.
And so I've only played Space Quest 2, but I think if there's again, I don't know if any of the Space Quests kind of do that King's Quest 6
I
poetic
haven't
turn,
I haven't played I haven't played the
4,
last
5, or
two.
6,
I've played halfway through 4.
halfway through
Um,
4.
but my impression is that the strength of the series was always the comedy.
Okay. Yeah,
And
there's not really any comedy in King's Quest. It's very it's very high fantasy,
yeah.
you know.
But I think the key to adapting those games is to find the action, and this is often the case, find the action in the story. Now, the advantage to some of the CR games is that the story is kind of disjointed.
Yeah.
It's
Well, it doesn't especially in Space Quest, it never felt like it really took itself seriously, which
yeah.
was part of the charm,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yep. And
King's
so,
Quest, I feel like did take itself seriously, but it was high fantasy, and that's appropriate for high
yep.
fantasy, I feel. So,
So if the story is about, for example, this prince making himself a king, which
right.
it's called King's Quest, I'm guessing that's the case. I'm guessing he
Well,
grew up.
that was the premise of King's Quest 1, right?
Yep.
It was the young prince trying to earn his crown, essentially his ascension.
So the question is, what did
Oh
he
my
have?
goodness.
So you take these stories. Oh, your cat.
I just woke him up by moving the thing. Oh my goodness. He was going full upside down, just sleeping, using my keyboard as the pillow.
Yep.
Oh my goodness.
Hmm.
What a cutie. I'm sorry, I don't mean
No
to
worries.
interrupt you.
No worries.
People love cats, right?
So a lot of the time with the adaptive process, you say the trick is often there's different sort of questions you can ask and approaches that you can use to see what draws it out of you. But one of my mental exercises when I'm looking at adaptation is, and especially if I'm talking to an author, I will say, okay, who is this story at the end? Who is this person at the end as opposed to the beginning of the story? Who do they become?
Right. How did they evolve or devolve?
Like rather than asking how did they evolve or devolve, because that's going to get them talking about the passive story points that influence their change. You don't want that. You want them to
But
say, who
I
are
don't think
they?
it's exclusively passive. I mean, it definitely can be passive, but I
Right.
think that characters can evolve or devolve through active lines of action.
They can, but we need to
Yeah.
isolate that active line of action. So
Okay.
rather than pollute that conversation, we're just going to say, who are they at the end of the story? Tell me who they are. Now,
But
tell
you
me
also care about who they are at the beginning, right?
and then tell me who they are at the beginning of the story.
Okay.
And then you say, what if they change themselves from this person to this person? What in the story supports the idea that they change themselves?
I like that. Yeah.
Like,
That seems like a very that seems like again like a very concise and clean way of defining the character action in any storyline.
and
'Cause
what
yeah,
did
that's exactly what it is.
and what did they do to change themselves? So
Right, like
in
what
this
actions did they take, right? Like it
in the
that's
in the
yeah,
larger sense, well, they went on a quest.
right.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Like,
Well, I mean, but that's also totally a fine answer because if they went on a quest, there's clearly a reason that they went on the quest. And yeah, I mean, look, the reason can be a passive reason, but I don't feel like it's too difficult to conceive of a more active reason,
that's
kind of thing.
now, and so the question is
Yeah.
like, okay, so what if they chose this for themselves? What if they woke up and said, much like, I mean, this is what the story we're telling is the Thor story that was written by Kenneth Branagh, right? This is the same thing. It's like what I need to
What did Kenneth Branagh write?
the story of Thor trying to prove to his father,
The first Thor.
yeah,
Yeah.
tr-
Did he was he the writer on that? I thought he was the director, but he was the writer on it?
if he didn't write it, then he was deeply involved in the writing process.
I adore Kenneth Branagh. Nothing but respect for him. Although to be honest, not a big fan of him as Gilderoy Lockhart, but also that character probably has problems that have nothing to do with Kenneth
Yeah,
Branagh.
I love him
It's like
too. I
people,
love him too.
I don't understand. Like people talk crap about like Wild Wild West, and I'm just like, dude, that movie is so much fun, and Kenneth Branagh is wonderful in that movie, and I don't. I mean, I struggle to kind of understand the criticisms or people who are just like, oh, it's just like this Western steampunk action thing that's just a Wilson. I'm like, dude, it's totally entertaining. For what it tries to be, it totally does what it's trying to do, kind of
Federico
thing.
agrees as well. Federico agrees as
Yeah,
well. We're getting Kenneth Branagh love from Federico.
Kenneth
So
Branagh is wonderful.
so yeah, so you take that question and then you say, okay,
Mhm.
so what did he actually do in the story? And then you say, well, what if he went looking for trouble? What if he went looking for a way to prove himself as
Yeah.
opposed to having him drawn out? Like, what if he just said, you know what? Like,
Right, he didn't miracle into some scenario that allowed him to prove his worth to be king. He
right.
was trying to force the envelope. He was trying to control an external thing that he couldn't control because he was young and stupid. And Odin, played by, in my opinion, the greatest actor of all time, Sir Anthony Hopkins. I look,
Hang
many
on one
wonderful
sec. Hang on
actors.
one sec. I got
Yeah,
to get AFK for just 1 second. Give me 1 second.
sure, sure, sure. That's fine. We can put the sleepy boy. He's so sleepy. He's so sleepy and cute. Do the close up right now.
Yep.
He's so sleepy and cute. Oh, he just woke up. He heard me.
So yes, I'm back. And yes, Odin Anthony Hopkins is fantastic.
Yeah, and it's a bit like the exile of Thor. Yes, it's something he ends up having to react to, but it's the byproduct of his own decision. Which
Thor
maybe I think maybe that's what you were trying to convince me, or not convince me of, but illuminate to me with The Martian, because you and I have talked at length about
Yep.
he's typing an endless stream of
Yes.
the squiggles in the Discord chat right now because he's using it as the
It
pillow.
he
Um,
forced his father's hand. I would say that Thor's arc
yeah.
is more active by degrees than
Oh, I
Mark
think
Watney's.
it's yes, yeah.
But
Then Mark Watney's
but Mark
right
Watney
because like
also went to an alien planet. Like he unquestionably he put himself in a situation where and he did
right
it
he made the choice to be part of the mission.
he worked his ass off to be he didn't just make the choice like
Right.
he went through a whole astronaut selection process like
Yeah.
and demanded as a botanist to be put
To be
on
included.
yeah like
Yeah.
to the degree that he probably had to shut out like how many other finalists were there like 500 like
Probably.
what did it take
And that's the interesting thing, right? Like, and that I think is a really good way to observe how lines of action affect the quality of a narrative, kind of
yes
thing. Because if we took that Mark Watney kind of line and superimposed it over Thor, so instead, like, let's say Thor accomplishes what he wants to do, goes out to the Odenheim, or what the
yep
Jotunheim,
yep
sorry, and whatever, I don't know, is victorious, and it convinces Odin that he's right, whatever, right? And Thor becomes king, and then has to deal with stuff that happens that his kingly responsibilities require him to deal with. It's not as good a movie.
well that's because he has better conflict this way because Odin is a
Yeah.
good king in this movie Odin
Yes.
understands he's not a great dad however like
It's not a great dad.
um but he understands what's good for Asgard and he understands
Yeah.
what's good for the world tree and so it's not
But
that
I think he understands what's good for Thor too. Like I don't think he would have done it if he thought that it would actually destroy Thor.
but his
Maybe
mission
he
but his
Well, and let me just
yeah
briefly finish. I think maybe Odin does have the perspective that, like, if exiling Thor is enough to actually break him or defeat him,
he might
then
not
he
have done
isn't
that
worthy. well, no, then he
Yeah.
isn't worthy, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I don't know. And it's possible. I mean, look at what Odin did with Hela, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it is possible, but it gives a dimensionality to another character as opposed to only just having the entire narrative be through like it really only is concerned with the one character,
Hmm.
which like look, there are narratives that do that and they're perfectly fine and
Hmm.
they function, but again, if we talk about like elevating
Hmm.
a script or a narrative, again, it's not a game. It's not a book,
Yeah.
right? Where games and books, you absolutely can do the entire narrative through the single
Yes.
the single character's line of action, because that's all that an individual is so complex that
Yeah.
you have all the time. And because it's an immersive experience rather than a voyeuristic one,
Hmm.
the audience will, I hate to use the word forgive, but it is essentially forgive the boring, that
Yeah.
it's only a single person thing. But if you're watching it, the experience of living, yeah, we view reality through our own perspectives and our own filters, but we very much understand that we don't only interact with ourselves in life. We
Sure.
interact with other people, and we do come to bring other people into our lives most commonly,
Yep.
and we trust them and we begin to learn about other perspectives and other identities and how everyone's autonomy is valuable. And that's the thing, right?
That's Thor's arc
Everyone's
actually, is learning that lesson. Like, because in the beginning Thor thinks
everyone's autonomy is valuable.
that's
Yes.
that's that's really his whole thing, and it becomes about protecting other people's autonomy instead of defining his own.
This
And
is why I say that it's totally okay for movies to have the power to give audiences the room to make observations. But I mean, I agree with you that like the purpose of a film or a television show can't be to get the audience to make observations. I just feel like there's nothing wrong with being able to add that layer in, kind of
I
thing.
don't think it is a layer. I think some actions really do speak very clearly to specific themes. That's all. I think if you
Okay.
tell the story of a person running for president in a totalitarian nation because the government is trying to build ties with the West, they need to host an election, and someone says, "Oh, okay, okay, let's fix this. Like, I'm going in hot." You can't tell that story without themes
Without
of
some kind of social
oppressive.
commentary.
It's 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 it's,
Yeah.
it's inevitable. Like, so, in the same sense, we're dealing with Thor's journey to proving himself is going to involve putting other people first. At the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to. So you can't.
Well, that's the landing of the plane for his arc, is that
Yeah.
understanding of putting things things beyond just himself,
Hmm.
with prioritizing them, and especially like because, and one might even say that this is the main message of the movie. That's what leadership is, right? And that's what kingliness should be,
So
kind of thing.
you don't get to be a good king without achieving that understanding, in at least
Yeah.
in the mythology of this particular universe. So, like,
And
and
but this is why Odin having that depth and dimensionality is so important, right? In my opinion, because Odin being the person like Odin, Thor isn't at the beginning of the movie ascending to the throne because Odin is incapable of ruling anymore.
right.
I think that there is a kind of a nuanced subtext in there that like Odin is ready to retire. Like he's ready to like give
Yeah.
the mantle to his son, because I mean, anyone with half a brain should be able to understand that being a leader, if you're doing it right, is really hard work, and it's
Yep.
really intense and draining, and some people are cut out for it and many are not, and there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with not being cut out for it, but it's almost like Odin is ready to rest,
Yes.
kind of thing.
Yes.
And so when Odin exiles Thor, that is to a degree Odin making a self-sacrifice, because it means he can't rest. It means he does need to persist
Yep.
with
Yep.
ruling Asgard and keeping order among the nine
But
realms and the world tree.
he
And
can't do otherwise because Thor's just proven that he's and so
yeah.
absolutely. And Odin's mission is
But Odin could be like, F it. I'm done with this anyway. I don't care what happens. We're gonna give it to Thor anyway.
How a character pursues their mission tells us who they are. And Odin is
Yes.
working to build his retirement in a way that is sustainable for Asgard, as
Yeah.
opposed to a way that will compromise Asgard's safety and security.
Right.
And
He's doing it in a kingly way rather than a selfish way.
yep. So I think talking about King's Quest, I think that there's plenty of opportunity. And in terms of how a character gets presented with a challenge, how, let's say, how he finds his quest, I think that it's not outside the purview um of Sierra narrative to have a character have to go find the thing that they need, as opposed to being, because how many of those levels are about finding the rock or finding the this or it's always trying to noticing details. So I think, you
It's
know
a quest,
it's a
right?
quest.
It's quest narrative.
So you have this hero go knocking on doors and being like, "Do you need, and is there anything I can?" "No, my prince, thank you." It's like, that's not what I'm asking. I'm just trying to find out. Like, do you like? And they're like, "No, slam." Okay, next door. Like, and he just works his way through the village until eventually he finds someone who's like, "Yes, yes, I'm so glad you asked." Like, and now it's through.
This is King's Quest 1 you're talking about.
Or yeah, yeah, exactly. Like,
This
and
is
now,
it's one of the two of the entire series I haven't played. So
but whatever it is, whatever that
yeah.
narrative is, he finds an opportunity to help somebody instead of just having them show up and say, "My liege, I need blah blah blah."
Right,
Like, and the king says,
right.
"Well, this is a."
It's there's an episode of Rick and Morty that's actually, I think, like very strongly leans into exactly what we're talking about. It's from the first season. It's the first Meeseeks episode, and I know you're not a Rick and Morty person, but for anyone out there who's listening, it's the first Meeseeks episode, which is like arguably one of the best episodes they've ever made, where Morty is fed up with Rick just dragging him off on adventures that like most of the all of the time like result in like Morty paying a price he really doesn't want to pay, and like Rick always fixes it for him kind of thing. But like it's like, Morty doesn't want to, break his legs and then have Rick fix them. Morty would rather not break. So he's like he manages to like kind of like shoehorn Rick into this perspective that it's like, let me pick an adventure. And, if it sucks, I'll never bring it up again. And they have a bet, right? Where it's like, if my adventure rules, you have to let me pick one in every 4 adventures. And Rick is like 1 in 10. But if it sucks, you never get to pick an adventure again, kind of thing. And Morty's like, deal. And so Morty takes them to like this medieval fantasy village in some other dimension, right? Because it's the infinite multiverse. All realities exist somewhere,
Okay.
and he goes around asking for quests,
Yeah.
right? It
Yep.
like tries to get, what's our quest going to be, and it turns into a Jack and the Beanstalk parody where they're like, oh well, there's this giant in the sky with all the treasures, and because he's so wealthy, we have no money for our kingdom and stuff like that, and it's a really crude premise. So they go up there. And of course, it's the total like tonal reversal where the giant comes upon them, and is like, oh, fee fi fo fum, but then like slips and falls and cracks his head on the side of the table and dies.
Yeah.
And then the wife and the baby giant show up, and like she drops the glass over them, and he's like, oh my god, Dale, and I'm calling the cops. And then they end up going to like giant prison, and then that they were never read their tiny person Miranda rights, so they are free fi to fo home or something like
Oh,
that.
I see. I
And
see.
on the way back down, they encounter the king from this village, who ends up being like a not great, like in kind of what's the word I'm looking for, accosts Morty in the bathroom of the tavern and
Oh, I see.
things like that, and it turns into this whole thing where initially it starts off as a very active line of action, Morty seeking out the stuff, and Rick is just tagging along for the adventure now. But then there's this like kind of reversal and juxtaposition where it ends up being like Rick at the end takes the active line of action, because Morty has been put in this spot where he wasn't really prepared to pursue whatever his goal was to the end. He was ill-equipped for it.
Yeah.
And so it falls to Rick to kind of salvage not just the adventure, but Morty and in a way the episode because they're very meta in what they
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, Rick is just like, all right, well, he gives it to Morty. It was an okay adventure, 1 in every 10, whatever kind of thing. But it is really interesting because it is that kind of that same. They're looking for an adventure to go on, and even throughout the series, a lot of Rick's like things that he drags Morty on are similar in a fashion where it's like Rick is essentially God in that universe,
Mhm.
and he why is he doing anything if he has all the power? Like, why is he doing anything? Well, it's just because like he kind of wants to. He just wants to do cool things and go on adventures, and there is something compelling for that.
Yeah.
And so the character just knocking on doors, looking for a call to adventure,
Yep.
actively seeking the call to adventure, which is of course in direct opposition to refusing the call, right? Which is
I would
a
love.
weird
I
thing.
I
Was
would Save the Cat
Yeah.
is I don't know if we've ever talked about this.
You and I have talked about Save the Cat like here and there, but
So
not at like great length.
there's a couple of things to talk about when it comes to Save the Cat. First of all,
Hmm.
it's worth noting that Blake Snyder was a novelist
Yeah,
who transitioned, and like many novelists, especially during the 80s, that's when we stopped hiring show people.
I
Most,
was a novelist
like,
first. Hi.
well, the novelists in general are in a position when they transition to film where they don't have the habits of scene work that we've been talking about. They're not trained
Right.
actors. They don't know a lot of acting theory. They sort of try to reinvent dramatic structure from a novelistic perspective, and with mixed
Right, because
success.
there's like there is that kind of like internal desire to like be understood through the visual medium as opposed to the text medium kind of
That's it
thing.
exactly. That's not what we're
Yeah.
doing. It just isn't. But there's that effort to do it. And so when they reinvent that wheel, they find the things that seem to be working and that executives tell them are working about the work, and they zone in on those things as the things that make film successful when it's not
Right.
necessarily that. That's the first thing to mention. The second thing to mention about Blake Snyder is that his most successful movie, and indeed the movie that made him the most successful spec writer of all time, which sold for $2 million. This is me telling you he deserves the credit he's given himself. I'm not arguing with that. The movie was Stop or My Mom Will Shoot, starring Sylvester
Right.
Stallone, which, if you've seen it, and you may not
I
have,
have not.
like, yeah, you're a little young for
Yeah.
this movie.
I'm familiar with the title because obviously of the relevance, but
Let me ask you this. Have you ever seen any Stallone movies from before you were born? Like, for example,
well,
Rocky.
Rocky,
Have you seen
of course.
Rambo? Have you seen First Blood?
I have not. I've seen Rambo 2.
Okay. And
I
why
have
these
not seen
movies?
the first Rambo.
And why these
Rambo.
movies and not Stopping My Mom Will Shoot? Because it's not the best Sylvester Stallone movie. It is arguably the worst Sylvester Stallone movie. And I think there's a case to be made. I say
Well,
this.
so but I mean, but this is the point, right? Like the first Rocky, he discovers an active line of action
Yeah.
after he is gifted the bout with Carl Weathers.
There's he it's not my favorite
I don't
screenplay. It's not my
I
favorite.
don't think you can make the argument that Rocky has that active line of action before the movie begins because it's
It's
like he doesn't know he's going to get this
it
chance.
is it is it is not a terrific screenplay. It does pick up, and he does, but the performance is
Yet
fantastic.
it was subject to a multi-studio bidding war back in the day, and Sylvester Stallone took a huge like cut on how much money he could have made because he insisted he had to star in it. Like
It's
we
a
know the
very
story,
it's a
but
very well directed and well performed movie, and the script is about him getting to the point where he can beat Apollo Creed at least. So it's got that
well, I think
going.
the first one is just he just wants to go the distance, right? He
Right,
doesn't
but
actually think he's going to win. It's just he wants to survive all 15 rounds or whatever it is.
but primarily the movie's concerned with the work of achieving that, which, like,
Right.
it would have been better if he had to get the fight, because that would have been a much stronger Act One if he had to put himself in that position as opposed to just winning a radio contest. But at the end of the day, like, the point that I'm making is that it is wildly more effective as a film than many of the other films that he was involved in at the
Yeah.
time. And the larger point that I'm making is I think we can attribute Blake Snyder's success to factors aside from his innate mastery of scene work. I think
Right.
that I think that it being the 80s in Hollywood, it's just possible that he might have had a really good dealer, like
Dealer.
Coke dealer. I
Oh.
think I think that he threw the best parties, or he had the right friends, or something happened, like it,
Fair.
or or whatever. But it wasn't like you can't point at Stop or My Mom Will Shoot and tell me that it's even one of the 100 best movies of all time.
Probably not.
You can arguably point to that movie and make a case for it being one of the 100 worst movies of all time. And and
I don't. I adore Rocky, right? And like honestly, I think there were some, even like I think that some of the sequels are. I don't even think that the original Rocky is like one of the two best movies in that entire franchise, kind of thing.
yep,
I think four is the best, not even close. Um, Four is really interesting. Obviously, and spoils for anyone who hasn't seen it. But like with Creed, with Apollo Creed getting killed in the ring, that's obviously not something you planned for. But the fact that there's a whole thing, right? Like Apollo would not give up. They
yep.
wouldn't. They wouldn't. He wouldn't let his corner throw in the towel.
Hmm.
And Rocky was in his corner, right? And so it's almost like it is kind of that thing where Apollo Creed's line of action gets transposed to Rocky through his death, kind of thing. And I don't think there's a problem with that
I think
if
that
if they are
Rocky could.
that
I think
close.
Rocky could have been a stronger character from the get-go, but I do think
Oh,
that
for sure.
I think. But the third point about Blake Snyder to
Yeah.
make here is that
Yeah.
he went ahead and did what novelists do. When he found that success, he wrote books about it. He didn't keep making
Yep.
movies, which makes perfect sense because he was
What's your catalyst? What's
exactly
your catalyst in the narrative? I mean, look,
that's
I didn't grow up with Save the Cat, right? I grew up with the Screenwriter's Bible by
yeah,
Trottier.
yeah.
And or Trottier. I don't know if it's R silent or not. But what I will say about the Screenwriter's Bible is that I don't think there is a better text in existence on how to properly format a screenplay.
Oh,
Um,
probably not, probably not. But I don't even think today's age like just get Final Draft or get Fade
Pretty
Editing
much,
and
and
be
it
done
does
with
the
it.
margins for you and does a lot of that. But there are some subtleties which are like it's not easy information to find on the internet if you Google for like how do I label time for an intercut? Is it same? Is it continuous? Like those are questions that can be difficult to just find answers to via Google.
And the truth
Um,
is, you're gonna meet different producers who want different things
exactly.
from those kinds of details anyway. So I'm not
Right.
super concerned about that. But
I agree. For formatting, it's great, but it does talk a lot about what the proper narrative structure for screenplays is,
yeah,
and it talks. There are seven moments. It is, and I remember them all. There's seven. There's the backstory. There's the big event. There's the catalyst. There's the midpoint. There's
and
the what is it?
these things are
Rising
pulled
action,
these things are pulled
climax, denouement.
these things are pulled from
Mm,
Save the Cat. They are
Save the cat. Yeah.
and the truth is, like, number one, it's an imperfect understanding of screenplay structure that is backed up by Blake Snyder's own work,
Well,
and
that's a literary structure.
it is. And
That's 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 Aristotle's poetics to a
and
degree.
he also built a cult in Hollywood around those books once he wrote
Yeah.
them. Like, to the point where you will see people die on the hill. You'll see people coming in and, like, as an executive, people will come in and correct you
Yep.
all the time using, and it's
Yep.
like, and the thing that makes that so brain numbing is that, yes, for a time the Save the Cat cult really was a big part of the culture of Hollywood's executive board and the middle management of Hollywood, because they did because these people are coming from business school, they don't know how story works, and they're looking for someone
Yeah.
to and literary structure is something they know from college, so they're going to embrace that understanding. But the truth is, it hasn't been for about 10 years or more.
Yeah.
People have gotten away from it, and thank goodness for it. And so when someone comes in and starts telling you, no, this is this story with these archetypes and this and that, and I'm like, you can speak
This
gibberish all you want, but let's talk about the movie. And if they fight you on
this
that,
is what I think the biggest problem with screenplay competitions is because what you just said
mm-hmm,
is like like there is a Save the Cat screenplay competition. It's called the Blue Cat screenwriting competition.
Yep.
I entered it one time. I haven't entered it again. Because the feedback I got on the script, I was like, you guys, like, I don't think you really even read the script or you tried to understand it. Because again, it's like it's clearly it's like at the lower levels when it is clearly just, like the interns doing the reading, it's not the industry pros. And I'm sure even when it does get to the industry pros, it's like they think that there is an algorithm
Yes.
to to good screenplays. And but that's what it is, right? Like that's what Save the Cat does. That's what, the Screenwriter's Bible outlines, is that there's an algorithm to doing it the right way. And if you do it the right way, you will have a Rocky on your hands. That's like the advertising. And it's so easy for people to buy into it because that is clearly how it works for books
Yes.
and probably to video games for video games to a degree. And so it's really hard to understand. And it's like, what it wasn't until you and I started like having conversations and you kind of pulled the curtain back for me a little bit, and you're like, there's more to it than that.
There's
And
fundamentals more than algorithms. There's fundamentals that
yes,
will lead you. And the truth is, you can
there's
tell any story you want through those fundamentals.
and the thing that really sold it for me, and I did come to I think I came to this realization on my own, but you definitely helped me get there, was like, if there was an algorithm, then none of us would be working,
Yeah.
because at this point, for sure, AI would be able to replicate it.
Yep.
Um, Failing AI, executives could just do it themselves.
Yep.
Why would you need to hire writers
Yep.
if there was just an algorithm?
Yep.
And it was well, it's not just an algorithm. You have to have a great ear for dialogue, and yes, you do have to have a great ear for dialogue.
But there are
And
simpler solutions. There's a simpler.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, it's yeah, it's not an algorithm, and this is what, in my opinion, and my acting coach agrees with me, is that, like, this is the problem with the method when it comes to acting. The
Sure. Yes.
method tries to systemize the process of acting, breaking it down into all these little intricate parts to make a puzzle, and you can algorithmize the process of acting in a way that everyone can do it.
Yeah.
And everyone can act, but it has nothing to do with the method.
Yep.
Kind of thing. It's like we're all capable of being actors, and I firmly believe that every human being on the planet is capable of being an actor. It's just, what's your dedication to craft? Do you really want to be an actor? Because
Yeah.
it's not just a quick thing. You don't just like catch a big break and all of a sudden you're a star. Like,
Yeah.
you work. It's like anything. Any art, you want to be a professional, and you work your what off for your entire life and hope you get the opportunity to show people how good you really are.
Yep.
And this is the thing, the method, it takes you out of even being an actor sometimes, because you're trying to adhere to the algorithm.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's the same with screenwriting. If you are trying to adhere to the algorithm, you do the exact thing that you told me months and months and months ago, that like ends up happening, which is that you get inorganic action from the characters because you're writing them in a direction
Yeah.
that isn't them. You're writing it to a purpose, not to the
Yeah.
characters. And so people are watching. If you put that
You're
story up on
rationalizing
the
the story
screen,
instead of telling a story. Yeah.
yeah, it's exactly, you're making an argument to an
Yep.
audience.
Yep.
You're preaching to an audience, and it's like you said, audiences don't watch things to be preached to. That's what they have church for, right?
Yep.
Like that's what they have politicians for.
Yep.
But people don't pay money. I mean, I guess with organized religion, you're probably donating to the plate or
Yeah.
whatever it is. But really, there's none of that in a movie. People are you don't get to watch these things typically unless you are giving away your hard-earned cash. And again, like you and I kind of opened our talk today, not just personally, about financial difficulties in today's
Yes.
day and age.
Yes.
And money is at a premium for a lot of people right now, and you better give them something that rewards them
Yeah.
rather than tries to teach them something. If people want to pay money to learn things about life, there you can always go to therapy, kind of thing. And yeah, we shouldn't be trying to be therapists. We should be trying to tell compelling stories about people who are like us. Whether it doesn't matter whether it's sci-fi or fantasy or whatever genre you wanna pigeonhole it into, because human stories can always be. It's exactly like Finding Nemo, right? That's not what fish do. That's a
Yeah.
human story,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
you brought it up earlier. It's a humanization of things because people are interested in seeing what you said. What's entertaining? It's watching people do things or attempt to do things that kind of they assume can't be done.
Yeah.
Um, and that is, of course, and that's a very Aristotle thing, right?
Yep.
It's we want to witness the improbable possibility rather than the probable impossibility, kind
Yes.
of thing.
Yes.
And because the probable and the improbable possibility is the passive action.
Yep.
That's the thing.
Yep.
Probable impossibility is the Chitauri
Yeah.
showing up in, lower Manhattan through a wormhole.
Yep.
Yeah, it was Loki who opened it, but Loki probably doesn't exist.
Yep.
If we're being honest. No offense to any Norse people out there. But yeah, I would love it if he did. Um, or maybe not. I'm not sure. It depends on which Loki. Is it Mask Loki or is it Avengers Loki? I'm not sure. and and this is I think to the point, and this is so relevant. This is why going back to Space Quest, it's so important to have Roger Wilco be that kind of active janitor superhero.
Yep.
Oh my God, like Noob Noob from that Rick and Morty episode from season 3, which I know is a reference you won't get. But again, it's another character who really, really wants to be part of the superhero team, but his job is just the janitor. And
Yeah.
he embraces his job of cleaning up the poop and
Well,
everything,
you've got
you
the
know,
shoveler
and
from Mystery Men by Bill Macy.
yes.
Like
Oh my God, I adore that movie. And Sally, the old Herkimer battle jitney. Sally's always telling me to dunk it, And oh my God, that movie is wonderful, right? That's a great example of
good comedy.
I would even say that One Punch Man doesn't exist without that movie, right?
Yeah.
I feel like there is so much influence in One Punch Man taken from Mystery Men, where it's just totally the ragtag band of wannabe superheroes who are trying so hard to be real superheroes and get all of the what am I the perks, right, of that being a
Yep.
superhero entails. And then it's very much like a be careful what you wish for.
Yep.
And but then love her Mini Driver, with her father's skull in the bowling ball and everything like that.
Until you can balance a tack hammer on your head, you can
Right.
never head off a balanced attack.
Dodgeball. I mean, wait, do you think dodgeball exists without that movie?
No,
If
no,
you can
no.
dodge a wrench, you
Did
can
Ben
dodge a
Stiller
ball.
did Ben Stiller direct Mystery
Yeah.
Men, or was
I
that?
don't know if he directed it, but again, look at Dodgeball, look at Mystery Men. They're both Ben Stiller movies,
No,
right?
but it was like you look at the movies that Ben Stiller did. No, it was Ken Usher, but he turned around. Ben Stiller turned around and did Zoolander. He did
Yeah.
um, Tropic Thunder, and to me
Tropic Thunder.
like
Oh my God.
so to me that set influenced hugely Ben Stiller's directorial ethics and his directorial approach, because
Yeah.
there's so much there's so much of that set environment that I see in those other movies. And you know what I mean? It's so much of a
Yeah.
piece. And that's not true of
But
the other movies he's been in.
but yeah, but even like Mystery Men, right? Like there are very clear and distinct lines of action
Yep.
throughout all of
Oh
it.
yeah. Oh yeah. From the
And
get-go, Mr. Furious is trying to get into the big leagues with his abilities that he just can't get working.
I'd even say Zoolander also has very clear and distinct lines of action.
It's a little
Um
reactive, but yes, it does. It
Well,
does.
I mean, I think that the lines of action change for the characters throughout the course of the movie. But Ben Stiller at the very beginning
He's trying to
is,
be the best. He's trying to be the
the
best.
best male model in history, and Owen Wilson
He's
is
doing this.
trying to usurp him,
Yep.
and Mugatu is trying to assassinate the Prime Minister of Malaysia.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
one
no,
of one of Will Ferrell's best roles by far.
Yep.
I gotta say, it's Will
And,
Ferrell as Mugatu was just a delight.
and Ben Stiller like realizes at a certain point that
But when he loses to
that being a model is more than just looking good. It's about using
is
your
being
good
more than
looks.
really, really,
Yep.
really, really ridiculously good looking.
It's about using your ridiculous good looks for
For
other
the
people's
greater good.
for the
He's
greater
a
good.
Spider-Man with
Yep.
great power comes great
It
responsibility.
really is that. It really is that, and he does achieve that in the end, literally by
And that,
putting.
that that's what his line of action turns into. He's like, "No, I have to save the day." It's
Yep.
like it's. I mean, right? I recognize that hand. It was in the fall 1978 Boulevard watch catalog. You know, and
I miss David Duchovny's movie acting career. Like not only Zoolander, but at the same time, and if you haven't seen this movie, I know it's another movie you're going to love. It's a very niche indie '90s thriller,
probably haven't seen it then, but hit me.
Playing God, starring
Don't know.
him.
I've never even heard of it.
It's him, Angelina Jolie in maybe her second big movie star role after
Her first
Hackers.
being
Hackers.
Hackers. What was the one that she did that was like cemented her as like a sex symbol? Was it Gigli or something like? Not Gigli. That was a Jennifer Lopez movie. What's the one I'm thinking of? She. I'll look it up in a second.
Hackers, I
Playing.
think, was like, but Playing God was definitely her first, one of her first roles in that vein. And Timothy Hutton, who you're gonna love in this movie, and and Peter Stormare, of course, as a Russian gangster, because why wouldn't you? Like, um,
Yeah.
no, you
I'm just trying to
you
see
should
what the
you should check this. It's not the script is not my favorite,
for
but
Playing God.
yeah, but you're gonna love this movie. I'm fairly positive you're gonna be mad that you didn't see it.
It was Gia. The movie was Gia with
Okay,
the Angelina, and it was before Girl Interrupted.
that was made for TV though.
Um,
Was maybe this was prior. Maybe this was after Girl Interrupted.
it was made for TV. It was a television film. So yeah, George Wallace was first, then Gia, then Girl Interrupted. I don't actually. Oh, I'm sorry. That's awards and nominations. That's not filmography. Uh, Angelina Jolie filmography. If I could spell. Um, so okay, here we go. So first ever was Looking to Get Out,
Hmm.
which I guess she was probably a child actor, and she's credited actually as Angelina Jolie Voight in that movie. Angelina Jolie is John Voight's daughter. Not a lot of people know that.
Yep.
Then did like Cyborg 2, Angela and Viral, Alice and Viral, then Hackers in '95, and then I don't even see Gia on here. That's so weird. Yeah, Without Evidence, Love Is All There Is, and then what was it? Playing God, 1997, right here.
It
So
was a
that's really
very
cool.
very small movie, like
Well,
obviously independently produced,
I'm gonna
and
have
they
to.
really like they achieved a lot. They achieved a lot, and Timothy Hutton is a character is a villain that I think you're gonna adore in that movie. I think you're gonna.
Yeah, no, I'll check it. Sorry, my manager just called me, so I had to
That's all right.
not
I think we've
answer.
I think we've put I think we've put Space Quest to bed. I think we found our way
You
in
think
and out.
so?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else to talk about.
I thought we
Um,
needed to do the 4 hours thing for hitting the streaming.
no, it's okay. It's okay. But we don't need to force it. It's fine. Like at the end of the day, I think we've done a noble job. There's next week. I've got streams tomorrow. I'm not concerned about it. I get my numbers. I get my numbers one way or
That's
another.
fair. That's fair. No, I mean, Space Quest, King's Quest, all of them, like clear. It's now that we've talked about it, right?
Hmm.
So clear to me how much potential there really is there.
Yes.
There's so much potential. It would be again, it just has the room to be something just totally like it could be like cult classic kind of thing.
And people are
But it
taking
could
those
also
kinds
have
of
fun as
risks
well.
with animation now too. You look at the work that Amazon is doing, and you look at the work that Netflix is doing, and there's room in the market for this. It's, you know what I mean? I think it's a unique comedic approach that has a more innocent and lighthearted attitude than something like BoJack Horseman, while at the same time acknowledging the complexities of the industry that we work in, and just the idea that like Roger Wilco is trying to make a TV show happen to save these game devs from like the worst retirement ever. like,
Yeah.
like it's hilarious, and like all of these villains like having to get dragged into this show.
Yeah. I mean,
Volhall, and you've got the
so
Sarians, and
oh my
you've
God,
got the
Volhall.
Time
The thing is, like,
Rippers.
Volhall can also just be like a recurring character too. I mean,
Yeah,
I feel like you wouldn't need to just follow the hard and fast narrative. Like, he does die at the end of Space Quest 2, right? Like, that's the whole point. You unplug his respirator thing, and
yeah.
he perishes. But
That's a pretty uneventful death, though. I feel like it's not a stretch to
yeah,
say. And he's a cloning expert.
right. It'd just be, you only killed my clone,
Yeah,
kind of thing. You know, it would
totally.
be this, like, kind of like Saturday morning cartoon,
Yep,
supervillain style
yep.
kind of thing, where you never actually get the big encounter between them. It's always an ongoing affair, like Batman and the Joker.
Yes,
Um,
yes. I think that's fair.
yeah, it'd be so great. And it was imagine, like, all of a sudden you make Bohall's goal to, like, pollute the galaxy, right? Like, what was it? What was
Well,
it?
his initial goal was first he tried the Sarian invasion, and then he was going to invade with insurance salesmen, cloned insurance salesmen, and
Right.
and
That's what it was.
so I feel like Vohal needs, like, it's hard. So there has to be a separate conversation there because he's all over the map in terms of his,
He's very Doctor Evil.
yes, and some of his plans are very effective and brutally simplistic, and other
Yeah.
plans are the most ridiculous and like, I'm just going to annoy you to death. Like, the insurance salesman thing is obviously, and it's a commentary. It's them saying we can be funnier about this. They're stepping it up, but the implication that he was behind the Sarian encounter is
Yeah.
is threatening. Like, the Sarians were genuinely a threat,
Yeah.
and they murdered everybody on Roger's space station. So
Right. Yeah.
so
And then Space Quest 2 was maybe a little bit lighter,
so
but
yeah, Vokal, like, a Joker is the good analogy because he's so dangerous. Like, he could be doing something just for purely satirical purposes. Like,
some men just want to watch the world burn.
yeah, exactly. Or he could be doing something brutally simplistic. Like, he could get tired of satire and just want to conquer the galaxy, or he could be doing something that is self-acknowledged to be useless. He might just be like, "No, this is just going to annoy everybody. I'm doing it because I'm the villain. Deal with it." Like,
Right.
like, and you don't know what you're going to get from him. So that's that makes him a fantastic foil because he is something. He's always creating messes for Roger to clean up. But
Right.
you've also got the pirates of Pestulon, who are who are rogue game developers themselves, which is fantastic. You've got the Time Rippers, who I haven't gotten to the bottom of yet, and various other things that are going on. So there's a lot of opportunity there, and the idea that Rogers,
Time Rippers being Space Quest 4, is
4,
that the one?
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, it seems great. I mean, I honestly, you talk about it as like an animated show. I don't actually know anything about, like, cost of animated shows. I imagine that they're cheaper because you don't ever have to deal with, like, sets, or
no,
all the crew that come
no.
along with all of that.
Just
But
acknowledge for a second
yeah,
that
yeah,
everything in the show is handmade.
handmade. Yeah,
Like,
for sure.
there's nothing in the show that isn't. So you want to use as many animations as possible over and over again. You want characters to
Yep.
do things that you can have them doing, and then
This is
and
the
then
Sailor Moon transformation sequence.
but also, like, if somebody grabs a mug, you want them
Yep.
to grab the mug from an angle that you can reuse when you have them grabbing other things and slip it in,
Yeah.
like, and
You just erase the layer in Photoshop and put a different layer in, kind
it
of thing.
happens all the time. And at the same time, like, even with that animation, the reason why it's not an hour-long show is because it's cost prohibitive and time prohibitive. Everyone is working around the clock to hit a deadline. From
That's
there's no
fair.
it's no Animation is universally
There's
expensive.
there's a wonderful line in a later episode of Rick and Morty
Hmm.
where um it's like uh that Rick and Jerry are infiltrating this fortune cookie plant because the fortune cookies are actually somehow accurate at predicting fortunes. Like, whatever they predict actually comes true.
Hmm.
And but, like, so because they're infiltrating, they need, like, disguises. And so Rick is like, Jerry assistant, make up. And Jerry undergoes the Sailor Moon transformation sequence. And Jerry's like, what the hell was that? And Rick was like, Sailor Moon transformation sequence. If we ever need to show you changing clothes again, we'll save a boatload by being able to reuse the animation.
Yep.
And then later, Jerry ends up, naked for some reason. His clothes get ripped off or something. And, someone says, like, Jerry, put on some clothes. And Rick is like, oh, wait, I got something. And they do the Sailor Moon transformation sequence. And Rick is like, I can feel the savings. It's great. It's great. It's so wonderful.
They have a scene in
Jump.
Invincible as well where like somebody asks him like, why do you do this? And he's like, oh, that's to save money. Here's like,
Well,
like
there's no title sequence for Invincible, right?
Yeah.
Like I mean, yeah, and a title sequence in theory you can reuse, episode to episode. But like there is no title sequence. It's just they have like a very slightly different animation of just like it's typically like blood splatter or something like that on the title card. And there was an episode in season 2 actually where I think like Mark goes to Comic-Con and is talking with the creator.
Yeah, that's what it was. That's what it was. Yes.
The creator of his favorite of what is it? The something dog, not super dog, Seance dog.
Yeah,
and
that's what it was.
I think it's voiced by the guy who's creating Invincible right now, like the show. It's one of the original guys from the comic. And he's like, and he starts talking
Robert
about all
Kirkman.
these tricks. Yeah, Kirkman, I think. And he starts talking about all these tricks about like sometimes we frame out the mouth so we don't have to animate the mouth,
and he's
sometimes
doing it all the whole time.
And the whole time, every time he says one of these tricks, they show it on the screen.
Yep.
It's brilliant. It's so good. So meta. If you want to jump down, just jump.
Yep.
So
that's the
he woke up,
that's the scene I was thinking.
and I think he wants to leave. So I don't know. Maybe that is a signal.
I think we're good.
Or
I think we
something.
nailed it. I think that's a fantastic Space Quest show. It would be so
I
much
love
fun
it.
to make. It would be so much fun to watch. Like it would be so
Oh,
entertaining.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it would do right by the content, and I think it's the kind of thing that streamers today would compete for. I think it's quality television. So
Well, I look at a show like are you familiar with Hell of a Boss at all, or Has Been Hotel, one or the other?
No.
So they're done by the same person. Has Been Hotel is the one that I believe got picked up by Amazon. But they're both like half-hour animated shows. They both take place kind of like in an alternate universe hell kind of thing, but they're comedic.
Okay.
And it's very much like just really crazy stories and shenanigans and stuff like that. But the thing about it is that like I guess originally Has Been Hotel was the creator's like true love.
Okay.
And I guess she did like the pilot episode of it, and like people were interested in getting it picked, and like people were interested in picking it up. How do you get people interested in picking things up? I'm not aware of this, but like it was being very slow in getting greenlit by like a formal studio kind of thing. So in the interim, she created Hell of a Boss, which was kind of like a spin-off of Has Been Hotel. And having seen both, I gotta say, I think Hell of a Boss is way better. It's wonderful, but it's also like just free to watch on YouTube. It was meant, I think, she was trying to prove that there was an audience for this kind of stuff. And it's almost like she didn't take it too seriously and didn't try to make it perfect. And that's maybe the beauty in it. Whereas like Hell of a Boss, it feels like it's trying too hard sometimes. Yeah. Or sorry, Hell of a Boss isn't too. Has Been Hotel feels like it's maybe trying to be too perfect. I know you want to go out. Give me a second. And like, why was I talking about? We were talking about the streamers, right? So like, but like at the end of the day, still, as far as I am aware, it is Has Been Hotel that got picked up. And I don't believe Hell of a Boss has, even though I do think that Hell of a Boss is even better. And I'm not saying Has Been Hotel isn't good. It's good, of course.
Yeah.
But I think Hell of a Boss is special. And I don't know why it hasn't been picked up and Has Been Hotel has. But again, there is clearly a market for this kind of stuff. And, a Hell of a Boss and Has Been Hotel are way higher, like, rating level in terms of, like, R kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's demons who like take out contract hits on living people in the world, kind of thing.
What was the game you wanted to talk about? We'll just do that one next week because you're obviously. What's it called?
Oh, what Castle of the Winds? I don't know if I want to do Castle of the Winds right away because it's just like I that might be something for like better on that because I think that like probably the thing about Castle of the Winds is that it very much draws on a lot of referential material of mythology that already exists.
Oh, I see.
Um, Mithril is a thing,
Okay.
I believe, and like it's like all like the spells that exist in Castle of the Winds, I'm sure already existed in Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons been around since the 70s, right?
I see.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, it
Like
has.
Firebolt, Ice Bolt,
Yeah, of course.
and stuff like so. It harkens to
It's very
all of those
derivative. It's
other.
very derivative, is what you're
It's
saying.
very derivative.
Um,
But the thing is, it doesn't really have its own narrative, right? It's a dungeon crawler for the sake of being a dungeon crawler. And again, as a game, there's nothing wrong with that. Those can be totally entertaining.
yeah.
Um, but as a movie, I think it's like, if we were to do something like that, I would rather do Duck Hunt because I feel like at some point we should do Duck Hunt. If I have to pick, so what? I get to pick next week.
Yeah. Do
Um,
you want to do Duck Hunt?
ooh, I mean, you know me. I love the big tentpole features kind of thing. I'm a big tentpole features kind of guy.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to just always make those on my thing. I mean, at some point, I really want to talk about, Legend of Zelda. Um, maybe, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, again, Legend of Zelda being a super reactive game, right? Like
Yes.
all of them,
But it's
super
the same. It's the
reactive,
same conversation. Who was Link at the beginning? Who was Link at the end?
right?
How could Link have done that for himself?
Do we
And
actually know though? Because Link never speaks, kind of thing.
yeah, well, he is. That's where the conversation starts. Who is he? Who is he? Like that's literally figuring that
I
out.
mean,
Isn't always. It's not always an obvious answer.
I would love to try and figure out like what's a game that we could make at the indie level, right? The firmly indie level, not
Yeah.
micro level, but somewhere, in the call it 1 to 7 or $8 million range
Uh
kind of
huh.
thing. What's a movie that like a game that really fits that? And maybe that's Undertale, right? Maybe that's something like Noida. I don't know. Noida being fantasy, maybe that's a little. You need so much VFX probably, but I don't know. It's a really interesting question, and maybe I can't come up with anything in the next 30 seconds, and I'm just like, all right, whatever. We just do Ocarina of Time.
Uh-huh.
But I there are so many wonderful games
Hang
that
on
I
one
think.
sec.
Yeah, let me let the cat out. He's gonna start chewing on the internet
I'm gonna
coaxial.
check. Yeah, I'm gonna check my.
It'll only take me 10 seconds. Yes,
Okay.
yeah, I know. Oh my goodness. Oh, go on.
All right.
I'm back. I'm coming back.
Okay.
I'm right here.
All right.
I think that like some of the ridiculous games that are like don't make any sense to adapt are probably some of the best candidates. And but again, then you look at movies like Wreck-It Ralph,
Yep.
which is I think is, probably a very, blatant attempt to recreate video game culture in cinema. Um, I don't. I mean, I've seen both Wreck-It Ralphs, and I don't. I like both of them. I think they're both fine movies, but I think that they probably suffer from the thing. Oh, are we not still live?
I think we are. Did I screw it up?
I don't see our video on Twitch anymore.
Oh,
Um,
you know what? I minimized the screen, and I think that screwed me over. Let me see if it comes back. Yep,
okay.
I did it. I was checking
Oh no,
the.
we're back. We're back now.
Okay. Yep, I was checking.
Um,
I was checking the. I was checking the. I was looking at my Steam wish list to answer the question. I
got it.
minimized the window and then uh because I minimized the window and OBS stopped reading it.
You know what? You know what? I would like to because we talked about a lot about it a bunch today.
Mm-hmm.
Can we do Mega Man X?
Sure.
I I I have such a fond place in my heart for that game, and I think that that is possibly one of the most difficult adaptations out there because the magnificence of the game is due to things that can only exist in games.
Yes. The gameplay
It
is the whole point of Mega Man. The whole point.
Yes. It's the gameplay, and it's character evolution through the gameplay.
Yeah.
You level up as a player of the game as X the character levels up
Yeah.
and becomes more so. There's such a correlation that you get better in the game as X becomes a better hero and a fighter and stuff like that.
Yep.
And also, it is kind of a reactive game
Yep.
in a sense of that, like, there is a problem and Vile and Sigma are here to, wreck shit up, and you have to save the world. So how do you turn it into, I think it is probably one of the most difficult adaptations to do if you're trying to make the film at the same bar of quality as the game, because
Yeah.
no one is going to be able to convince me that it's not one of the greatest video games ever made. I don't think it is the greatest video game ever made, but for me, if your top 10 list doesn't include it, I don't think you like. I seriously question, whether or not I can really like count you as a reliable narrator kind of thing.
At that point, I mean, I
Yeah.
am not like I stopped playing platforms.
Okay. It's
Like
a Super Nintendo game, right?
yeah,
It's like
I stopped
it's one of the older
exactly.
ones.
But I stopped like
Um,
I had a Genesis
yeah.
and I never owned a Super Nintendo and I never
Okay.
bought another console.
I
So
never owned an NES. My first system
yeah,
ever was N64, and then once I had money of my own and could start actually buying stuff for myself, I actually went back and bought a Super Nintendo when I was like in my 20s because
yeah,
there were games I wanted to play. Like, dude, I am a sucker for like Gradius 3, and that would be a great one. Oh my God, talk about great games to adapt. Gradius games or
yeah,
like Ikaruga from the GameCube. For the record, I just want to say, I think that GameCube is the most underrated console of all time. Some people might say Sega Dreamcast. I think there's a strong argument to be made for Sega Dreamcast. But I think that GameCube is the most underrated console of all time. There are so many bangers
yeah.
that came from GameCube. I think the greatest horror game of all time, and oh my God, I'm gonna get crucified. But if this podcast ever goes viral, I will get crucified for saying this. I think the greatest horror video game of all time was made for GameCube, and it's Eternal Darkness.
Hmm.
Are you familiar with it at all? Do you know
No,
Eternal
no,
Darkness
I
at
don't.
all?
I don't.
People who are like Silent Hill fans, Resident Evil, and don't get me wrong, Silent Hill, Resident Evil, those franchises are iconic and absolutely deserve their place in the Hall of Fame. There's no question about that. I still maintain that that Eternal Darkness is the greatest horror video game ever made. Look, it had a sanity meter,
Yep.
right? And when the sanity meter ran down, it would do really weird things just to mess with the player, not the character, right?
Yep.
And it had the best one of all time is the effect would only take place when you moved from one room to another room. So it was like that King's Quest thing. It wasn't seamless world. You had
Yeah.
to move from one room to another room.
Hmm.
When you moved into another room, like sometimes you would be, the y-axis would be inverted and the whole screen would be upside down, or sometimes your body would just erupt from like scarab beetles, like the mummy or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But one of them was you would just be walking around and everything would seem normal. You're like, oh, okay, I didn't get hit with a sanity penalty in this room, and you would get the blue screen of death. The Windows blue screen of death. And everyone, this was like, again, the game came out before, Apple was the massive, what's the word I'm looking for? Like
The giant.
monolith,
Yeah. Yeah.
paragon of industry that it became,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And everyone who had a home computer back then, it was Windows kind
Yep.
of thing.
Yep.
So everyone who played that game would have been familiar with the blue screen of death. And
Yep.
the first time it happens to you, because again,
You don't
it's a
remember
game
you're
back
on
then.
a GameCube.
There's no
Like,
there's
yeah.
no autosave function back then.
Oh, I
You
see.
have to be saving at certain points. You would freak out. You'd be like, oh my God, no, what happened? And then the game would just sound like, ah, and you would go back to the game and you're like, oh my God, it's a sanity thing. Oh my God, it is the best got you in a
Yep.
video game I have ever seen in my life. Like the best got you I've ever seen in an anime series also came in the only horror anime to make my top 10, which is Mirai Nikki Future Diary. It's not Elfen Lied, it's not any of those. It's Future Diary. It has the best plot twist I've ever seen because it does the thing that I think a great plot twist must do if you're gonna have a plot twist, which is the audience has to see that there's a plot twist coming for the entire time.
Yep.
They have to know that there's going to be a plot twist. It's set up like the story doesn't make sense unless there's some big twist or big reveal that happens, and they can't figure it out, but it still makes perfect sense.
So you've thrown a couple of ideas at me here, and like the idea that we should pick games that are like so buried in the gameplay has triggered a couple of thoughts.
I would like to do Mega Man X. I think
We should do
that's
that.
going to be a huge
We
challenge.
should do
Yeah.
that next. But I've just put on the list Splatoon
Oh God.
and SimCity.
SimCity will, yeah, I give a thumbs up for SimCity. That will be a fun one. Or you're like, like Roller Coaster Tycoon. This is one of
Yep.
those crazy ones. How do you make Civilization a movie? Oh my God,
yep,
right? Like
yep,
like that's tough, right?
yep,
Because
yep,
it is kind of, it has that turn-based strategy feel.
right,
As it is, it's a turn-based strategy game, but it encompasses all of human history.
yep,
And
yep,
you can't do it like History of the World Part 1, love Mel Brooks, right?
yep.
And all of that. But you can't do it like History of the World Part 1. You can't do it like what was the Monty Python version of that? I'm
Life of
a
Brian.
brief No, no, there wasn't there a Monty Python version of essentially it's like the same kind of movie as History of the World Part 1. Um
I don't know.
and I can't remember. I think there was, but History of the World Part 1, right?
Oh,
You got Mel Brooks dressed up in
yep,
the red Spanish cardinal getup,
yeah,
doing a musical number, The Inquisition,
yep.
right? Like you
It's
and
not that. It's not that. It's a much more serious movie.
that to me that's apex cinema,
Yeah.
right? That is
Okay.
apex filmmaking, but it's not that, right? You can't make Civilization a comedy. I guess you could, but
It's
how
not.
do you make
It's
how do you make
I will make
Civilization
that.
a
I will
movie?
make that after we do Mega Man X. Civilization will be my next pick. That's a good idea.
Is it like you have to frame it as like a god versus god kind of
Well,
narrative?
the
I
other
don't
the other
know.
thing I was thinking is we should also do black and white,
Oh, wait, black and white?
which is the one where you're a god and you learn spells and you have to guide all the people. But black and white might be too similar to Civilization.
I'm
It
not
might be
familiar with
too.
black and white. I guess I
It's
don't
okay.
know black and white. You said black and white, and my brain was like Mr. Game and Watch,
No,
but
no.
like no,
Actually,
that's not.
the
That's
game was
yeah.
called Black and White, and you
I've
play
never heard of it.
and you play a god, and you have these villagers, and you cast
Okay,
spells upon them, and you cultivate them into an army and a civilization, and you conquer other lands.
it's like
And
some this is Sim Army, Sim Civilization
yeah,
kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Yeah. Wow.
but there's a spell casting mechanic which is very similar to like the spell casting in the Wizards Unite, the Wizards,
Okay.
the Harry Potter thing where you draw your finger and you have to get the thing right.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Like there's a whole lot of that kind of like, and you learn these gestures and you use the mouse and you send
Yeah.
powers and forces and create weather and do all these things using your
Okay.
spells. But you know
Yeah.
what? It's too similar to Civilization. Civilization is the one to
In
do.
in briefly talking about this, something that's just become very clear to me is that while it might be very interesting to talk about adapting RPGs, that's essentially all we've really done, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we kind of just like allegorized StarCraft into an RPG because it's a kind of like what it is, even though it's an
Yeah.
RTS. I mean, there is an
Yeah.
element of RPG where like you're playing as Jim Raynor for a lot of
Yes.
it.
Yes.
I mean, Call of Duty very clearly the campaign is an RPG. And the Space Quest very clearly an RPG. I think yeah, I guess that's what it is. I think I would like to not do an RPG next week.
Okay.
And I understand that Mega Man X is an RPG, but it's a side scroller, right? It's a little bit different. It's not that kind of you get to decide what the character is doing. You don't get to decide what the character is doing. You only get to choose how the character fights,
Yes.
kind of thing.
Yes.
So I wouldn't necessarily call Mega Man X like a conventional RPG kind of thing. And so I would still like to do Mega Man X, but
Let's
I'm
do it.
very intrigued in doing the non-RPG things.
So
And
we'll
at
do
some
Mega
point, I
Man.
absolutely would love to do Duck Hunt. How do you make Duck Hunt a movie? And what was the one you were talking about? The Goose movie?
You
Is
know
that what
what?
is it?
We're gonna
No.
put a stop to that conversation right now.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Something
Nope.
must have come up. Okay.
No, no,
All
no,
right.
no, no, no. It's just there are certain things that are already
Okay.
proprietary to certain people.
Understood. I won't bring it up.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So yeah, then at some point we got to do duck hunt, and we got to do some like oh my like again you and I talked about at one point like how Tetris, right? Like ow.
Well, actually, Apple produced a movie
Yeah.
about the acquisition of the Tetris property,
Okay.
which looks like a great movie, and I think that's
Hmm.
the end, like because it was a coup getting like Tetris was acquired during the Cold War,
Right. Right. Yeah.
and it's just so happens that a game developer here in this country got their hands on like a like a like a what you call it, you know, a
Source
copy.
code.
No, no,
Yeah.
just a like a disc that had worked its way around a bootleg. They got their hand on a
Oh.
bootleg
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
of this guy's game, and he had to figure out how to negotiate like getting
The
that
rights.
into Nintendo without setting fire to this man's life
Yeah.
and making him an enemy of the Russian government.
Right. Yeah. Because it's
Like,
Cold War. Yeah.
yeah, like the whole thing is it's I haven't seen the movie, but it's a that you should check the movie out. I forget what it's called, but
All right.
I think Taron Egerton plays
Okay. No, I'm
the
gonna look
exec.
into it because like I love movies like Fistful of Quarters, the Kong story,
Yep.
and the stuff like that. Like documentaries about video games are always great. So,
All right,
um,
let's call it here.
yeah,
Stuff is going on
yeah,
here that I can pay attention to, so I'm gonna leave you, dear
sounds good.
viewers. um, Thank you, Greg. This was a lot of fun. I do think we nailed
Yeah,
it. I do think we got that
yeah,
nailed
I'm
down.
I'm I'm happy with it for sure. And Space Quest, yeah, let's make Space Quest, right? Let's do it. Someone hire get the IP, hire us to write it.
Yeah.
Hire Tennyson to write it. Tennyson will do a wonderful job of it.
Hey, it takes a village. It takes a village.
It does,
These
it always
beautiful
takes a
things
village.
about television is that you're working as a team. Like there's a writer's room.
Yes.
All right.
That's well, yeah, and they're not necessarily for movies. So,
Yep.
all right.
Thank you, Greg. Have a great week. Thank you, dear
Thank you as
viewers.
well.
Anybody who checks this out. Thank you for watching Federico. It was great to have you. And don't be a stranger, Ranger.